As a child, Linda was considered strange in the yard because she wasn't afraid of dentists either. When other children were being dragged into the dentist's office by their parents with tantrums and faces red from crying, Linda was eager to peek through the narrow slit of the door and see what was going on in there. She wasn't afraid during dental treatment. Maybe because she didn't eat a lot of sweets, or maybe because everything that was going on aroused the girl's keen interest. She followed every movement of the doctors and afterwards asked a million questions, flapping her naive, childish eyes. The sound of boron machines, the wonders of filling solidification, white coats. All this was an outlandish world for 8-year-old Linda. It was no surprise to anyone that after graduating from high school, the girl firmly decided to become a dentist. All through high school, she prepared. Diligently, she learned chemical formulas and diligently solved biology tests. Sometimes Linda put on a white coat at home, a cap, and imagined that she was seeing patients. She had once borrowed a doctor's outfit from a neighbor who worked as a pediatrician at the local polyclinic. "And want you, Linda, in the teeth of other people's uncles and aunts to pick," sighed her mother, stirring the borscht in the pot. "But you want to teach cranky children?" Flipping through a book, replied the daughter. "I guess you're like your grandmother," the woman grinned, "only she was treating cattle on the ranch, and you decided to get to people." Linda grinned understandingly. Grandma Emma had worked as a zoo technician in the small town for a long time, until she retired. And even after that, she often came to check the condition of the animals at the request of her superiors and delivered cows in difficult labor. At the same time, grandmother was not shy to cover young graduates of the Veterinary Institute who had just arrived at the ranch and did not even know that it was dangerous to approach cows and horses from behind. When the ranch was disbanded, the tough-on-words elderly woman continued to be called by the local owners. So as long as the small town had at least a couple of cows, there was plenty of work. Emma lived like that, where she had worked half her life in a small town in Kansas. Linda's mom, Aunt Melissa, took a different path. She didn't want to live in a small town and went to a bigger city, hoping to fit in and achieve a rank above honorary milkmaid. However, the bigger town did not treat Melissa as favorably as she would have liked. The woman did not advance further than a primary school teacher, but received in the last years of good work, a small one-room flat. The kind where the kitchen is already cramped for 2 people. It's where Linda was born and raised. No matter how cozy it was under her mother's wing. But at the age of 15, the girl thought about living separately. But no way. The modest salary of a teacher did not allow such a luxury. Her father stayed with them for a short time. Like many truckers, he lived for 2 families, of which neither of them knew. In the end, the man simply did not return from another trip. The mother waited 6 months, and then, gathering her courage, filed for a unilateral divorce. Linda was secretly sad. She loved her father, and she missed his care, advice, and experience. However, after such a prank, her mother did not start any new relationships. She lived with her work and her daughter. The final exams came, followed by the holidays. And now Linda stood in front of the doors of the medical school, struggling with shyness to enter. She had passed by countless times, dreaming of how she would get her student card and credit. But now the familiar outer wall seemed harsh and pressurizing, even though the fulfillment of her dream depended on them. It felt strange. "You're not a sophomore." Someone touched her elbow. Linda turned around and saw a blonde girl with a pointy nose and strange, age-inappropriate, brightly colored hairpins. She looked like a sophomore. Linda opened her student ID. "Yeah, I'm in 2. "Cool." The stranger shone and clapped Linda on the shoulder. "Finally, I found someone. My name is Catherine, by the way." Linda. Linda. "Let's go find our group and office." Without waiting for an answer, Catherine pulled her by the arm towards the entrance. The classmate was probably the kick Linda needed to take the next step towards her goal. None of her high school acquaintances had applied to medical school, and she felt inarticulate. There was a sea of new faces around. Many had traveled from other states to study. Only a couple of times did vaguely familiar necks from high school flicker through the crowd. "I came from the state of Michigan that's 1,600 kilometers away," whispered Catherine on the pair. "Where are you from?" "I'm a local." I grew up here in the city, Linda replied. She didn't really want to be reprimanded in her first class, but her roommate apparently liked to talk. On the other hand, she needed to make new friends in the student body. Cool. I'd always wanted to live in the city, but my folks at the ranch wouldn't let me until I graduated. Catherine rolled her eyes. Linda stared blankly at her new acquaintance sunshine skirt, blouse, shoes that had been the trend in town last year, bright shadows and bold lashes. Apparently fashion was delayed in reaching other states. I want to be a beautician in general, because in our small town, no one knows how to take care of themselves. It's poultices, 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 poultices. It's horrible. Catherine snorted so loudly that she caught the teacher's questioning look. When the danger passed, she expressively poked a finger with acid green varnish on her eyelids and whispered, "And I'll be a makeup artist. I've already seen some success. I've made up all my girlfriends for the wedding." "Yes, I'm sure you did." Linda held back a smile, looking at the bright spots on the face of her interlocutor. The pressure, simplicity, and a certain naivety with which Catherine communicated both repelled and attracted at the same time. In her, there was no frosts of the big city as in her girlfriends. There was wooden, like a birch log, openness, inherent in all people from the backwoods. "What are you going to do? Give injections or run around as a nurse?" Catherine blew her fringes out of her eyes and stared questioningly at Linda. "I plan to specialize as a dentist. It's been a dream of mine since childhood," she replied. "Oh, well, you'll change your mind 10 times. Waved her hand. "What if you don't like it?" "It's difficult. Dentists them now as lawyers, pond. I hope it doesn't happen." Linda tried to write down the outline, while the restless Catherine poured her with questions. "Will you do the session by yourself or with assistants?" Catherine nodded conspiratorially at the teacher. "I'd like to do it myself. I'll teach. I'll try for sure." Linda had already realized that the chatty Catherine wouldn't leave her alone until she had no more questions to ask. Before the end of the class, the girl from the countryside had time to talk about how she had settled in the dormitory, about how her mother had packed her bales with things, about her nagging neighbors nagging that her shoes were uncomfortable, about the cute students from the parallel group. Discussed the hair color and outfits of all the girls sitting nearby. Even the color of the lecturer's shoes did not escape her keen nose. Linda's head was spinning, but the funny thing was that she wanted to keep talking to this strange lady. There was something about her that Linda was missing. When the class was over, Catherine suggested going to a cafe nearby, saying that she wanted to understand the difference between the cakes made in the city and those made in the countryside. Gradually, Linda and Catherine became such friends that even their teachers began to call them an inseparable couple. Calm, restrained Linda and the volcanic Catherine. Studying wasn't easy. Linda was warned about it, and teachers at school, and her mother. Medicine does not tolerate dilettantes, and students from the first year were driven mercilessly. Sometimes Linda fell asleep over the notes. Her head was swollen from the incredible amount of information crammed in. Early rising and the long road to the institute also exhausted her. But the main thing was that the childhood dream, even if slowly, but approached her. Catherine did not strain herself so much. She often read magazines on the pairs, could oversleep, and in general perceived going to the institute only as an excuse to dress up. "They'll expel you after the first session." Sometimes said Linda, careless friend. "Oh, I just need this crust for a beautician." Catherine waved away. "But for a certificate you need to pass the exam, at least a C," braked her Linda. "I have enough knowledge for a C," confidently declared the fashionista from the backwoods. In fact, Catherine was not so lazy. She just had a different picture of the world. Instead of daily cramming, she preferred to stay up the night before the seminar to answer before forgetting what she had read. She took notes from her neighbors and used textbooks and methods to prop up the wobbly table in her room. Catherine was not lazy, and because she immediately began to look for some part-time jobs. More precisely, they found it themselves, that flyers to hand out in the dormitory. That's something somewhere to carry for a small fee. So by the end of the semester, she was invited to work evening shifts as a barista in a small coffee shop. Catherine brewed coffee a little better than the cleaner, but made eyes at all visitors and smiled at 32 teeth. She left good tips, which the girl used to buy cosmetics and new handbags. directness and simplicity from the backwoods of Michigan broke through where the urban was difficult. Catherine was not afraid to look silly, and it always played to her advantage. She had a goal, too, and the girl was just going about it in her own way. Linda and Catherine were always fun. She knew the latest gossip, kept a lot of funny stories, could quickly make up her friend in the bathroom before class. On one of the frosty days before the session, Linda stood at the bus stop in the morning and waited for the bus. Several other people were crowding along with her. Time was running out, and the bus was still missing. The grannies behind Linda were getting louder and louder. In the end, a man in an old-fashioned fur hat and a briefcase couldn't stand it any longer and asked the driver of the next bus where the number 14 had gone. "They've all been abolished." He shrugged his shoulders indifferently. "Now you go to the center only with transfers." Rumors that the bus would be abolished had been circulating for a long time. But as it happens, everything happened at the most inopportune moment. The man in the fur hat cursed loudly, not embarrassing the passengers, and began to hurriedly call a taxi. Linda realized that she would have to do the same to avoid being late. As luck would have it, the first class was a seminar with a very picky professor who wouldn't let latecomers in. To get to the institute, Linda gave away all her money, even scraped change out of the furthest pockets. She ran into the auditorium a moment before the bell rang and, breathing loudly, flopped down on the bench next to Catherine. "Where have you been?" "I was already thinking about how to get you off." She pounced on her friend with questions. "My bus doesn't run anymore," Linda complained, laying out her notebook. "I have no idea how to get here now. It's either a detour across the city or a taxi." "So you moved to my dorm," Catherine shouted at once. 5 minutes and you're at school. The main thing is not to forget to brush your teeth." Linda wanted to object, but suddenly realized that the idea wasn't so bad. And if she had to choose between getting up an hour earlier and expensive taxes, Catherine and the dormitory won either way. After all, she'd wanted to live on her own for a long time. Student room fees were ridiculous. She spent more on commuting from home, and she could go to her mum's for the weekends. "I just had a neighbor who moved out, so that, as they say, all the cards were stacked." Catherine theatrically raised her hands to the ceiling. "You'll write an application to the commandant, and they'll move you in quickly." Linda nodded. The time that was spent on the road could be used for more useful purposes, studying, walking, and getting enough sleep. The superintendent was a little nagging when she gave her the papers. "What are you doing?" "You're a local. I need to settle non-residents." The girl kept silent, knowing that she was obliged to settle in. The commandant once again looked at her with the look of a dog wanting to put a dog on a passerby in case of something, but there was no such thing. Eventually she accepted the application and told her the move-in date. As soon as they were out of the dormitory, Catherine squeezed Linda so tightly in her arms that she even squeaked. "Yay, yay, we're together now." Her mother took the news of her daughter's future move with enthusiasm. The flat was cozy, but cramped. And that fact, alas, even a mother's love didn't change. "Don't eat anything bad there," Melissa admonished her daughter, putting towels and a new set of bed linen in her bag. "And don't drink. At my place." She shook her fist expressively, but rather jokingly. "Or that Catherine, your girl, will start to influence you badly," continued the woman. "She's fine." Linda defended her friend. "She's just peculiar." A few days later, on a day off, the girl arrived at the dormitory with her things. Catherine was already waiting for her, helped her to bring everything in, to settle in, showed her where everything was. The room was small, but here Linda had her own separate bed, her own desk, a wardrobe shelf, and a whole wall. All in all, it wasn't too bad. The main thing was that it was a couple of minutes from the uni, and the rest would get used to it. In the evening of the same day, Linda and Catherine were walking down the corridor and suddenly they were called. "Hello, girls." A student peeked out of a nearby room. "Hi, Johnson." Catherine turned and tilted her head to the side, like a magpie looking at a shiny bauble. "What do you want?" "Let's join us, because we, the female company, is not enough." The guy waved his hand invitingly. "We'll feed you, we'll drink you, we won't leave you offended. It's our birthday, after all." Linda tugged Catherine's elbow questioningly. "That's Henry Johnson from third year. He's been after me since the beginning of term," she whispered back. "He's not bad, but he's a bit of an oaf." "And you want to go?" Linda took another look at the boy who was persistently beckoning them to come. "Why not?" Catherine stared at her, puzzled. "Tomorrow is Sunday anyway. There's no need to go anywhere. We'll sit, chat, all of us. Nothing to be afraid of." She turned to Johnson. "All right, we'll be there soon, just wait." The guy glowered, gave them a thumbs up and disappeared into the room. Linda hesitated for a moment, but then she thought about it. She hadn't really made friends with anyone except Catherine in 6 months of school. Of course, she'd talked to her classmates, but it wasn't the same. And her old school friends came to visit less and less often and wrote shorter and shorter letters. And they didn't understand why they had to go to an institute on the other side of town. Catherine quickly combed her hair, changed from pajama trousers into jeans, found a decent t-shirt in the wardrobe. Linda didn't bother with that. She just tied her hair up. There were 3 guys and a girl in the room, apparently the couple of the birthday boy, tall, thin as a pole, but very hospitable. An old acquaintance beckoned and greeted the girls and introduced the company. "This is David, the birthday boy, and his Lady Mary. This is Alex, the future of urban medicine." And this Henry jabbed his finger at a boy sitting on a chair by the window, is Ray from the journalism department. The girls were warmly welcomed and seated at the communal table. After a while, the shyness of acquaintance evaporated without a trace. Everyone was drinking, eating, joking. Mary suggested a game of crocodile. The boys readily moved the bed and, making room, Linda stared blankly at all the new acquaintances. Henry was making small talk with Catherine. It was obvious he liked her. He was trying to put his arm around her, brushing invisible dust from her shoulder, scratching the back of her head. David and Mary had been together for a long time. It was obvious from their communication and warmth towards each other. A note of distant envy even ran through Linda's mind. She had dated a guy in high school, but he had never treated her with the care and warmth that these two did for each other. Alex made occasional jokes about doctors. During breaks when his mouth wasn't full of food, he'd already put a couple of ketchup stains on his t-shirt. But would that stop a man with a big appetite? Ray was the only one Henry introduced differently than the others, and he didn't fit at the table. He sat by the window with a plate in his hands. But that didn't stop the young man from collecting all the stares. He told stories, he joked, he asked provocative questions, he posed picturesquely. "Ray's a talker," David snorted. "He's a man who's chosen his profession to scratch his tongue." "I'd rather scratch my tongue than pick at people." The journalism student made a theatrical grin, which immediately caused the company to laugh. "What's wrong with helping people?" Linda suddenly asked. Everyone fell silent and stared at her with interest. Ray also looked at the guest. "Well, you're not going to help them for free. Or are you going to open a branch of the Mother Teresa Society?" He sarcastically teased Linda. "I want to help first of all. I go into the profession by the call of my heart, not because it is profitable," said the girl. "You need to eat, don't you? So stop covering your ambition with charity." Ray waved his hand at her. "Sooner or later, people will become just a means of earning money for you. But some people will make money by talking, and some will see rotten teeth and other unpleasant things in the human body." "Ray, come on, this is the 3rd year you've been arguing with us. All professions are needed and all have their talents." David said conciliatingly, "Let's have a drink and play cards." Linda gave Ray an irritated look, but didn't argue further, so as not to offend the birthday boy. The trouble was, she liked the smug talker. Ray had the typical smarmy looks, chiseled features, dark hair, strong charisma, and a sharp mind. Gradually, the angular conversation blurred and the tension it had created went away. The party had passed midnight when there was a knock on the door. "Sugar," David hissed, "the commandant's here." Before Linda knew it, the table was covered with a sheet. Mary and Alex were tucked under one bed, Catherine and Henry under another, and she and Ray were shoved into the wardrobe. It all happened so fast that hardly a fly could have flown in that time. The commandant's voice was heard, reprimanding David in a half-toned voice for the noise and mess after lights out, while he did his best to demonstrate the supposedly empty room. And so it was, every time. Ray sighed in Linda's ear, Why don't you just pay your aunt a wage? He'll hide us in the cupboards, you idiot. The wardrobe was cramped. Linda felt her back against the guy's chest and almost stepped on his feet. For some reason, her cheeks were flaming and her tongue was lashing out. Ray gently touched her shoulder, as much as he could do while standing in a wardrobe full of clothes. You'll have to excuse me, okay? It's my nature to pick things apart. That was rude. Without turning round, Linda replied. She could feel the guy's guilty, if guilty, breath on the back of her neck. It was getting stuffy. Let's go out tomorrow, and as an apology, you pick where you want to go. Ray put his hand on her forearm. The commandant let go of the last of her nagging remarks, wagged her finger at David, and made to leave. Goosebumps ran up and down his body, hot and cold at the same time. The tension was back in the air, but lingering, enveloping. Let's go, Linda agreed, to the exhibition of contemporary artists at the gallery. All right, I'll be waiting at 17 at the dormitory. The wardrobe doors swung open. Why aren't you two fighting? David chuckled. Almost. Ray was the first to jump out, winking discreetly at Linda. You all right? Why did they put you and that jerk in there? Catherine clucked, giving the boy a stare. I think we're going on a date with that jerk. Linda whispered quietly, trying to hide her red cheeks and the stupid love sparkle in her eyes. Linda, you have golden hands. The grateful patient smiled goodbye and left the office. Linda took off her gloves and nodded to herself in the mirror. It was for moments like this that she had gone to the dentist's office, for grateful looks and sincere appreciation. And she didn't regret the years she'd spent studying. First 5 in medical school, then residency for another 3. Paperwork for the registrar's office. A dressing gown to take home to wash. So what else, Catherine to call? They were supposed to meet today for a professional holiday. Linda threw on her coat, said goodbye to the girls at the reception desk and hurried to the shop for a cake. Catherine had still had a sweet tooth since uni. No one was home to see her yet. Ray warned that he would be at the agency until the evening. He'd started moonlighting there while he was still at school, and 7 years later he'd taken the editor's chair himself. But Ray had connections with every authority in the city, from vegetable stalls to the prosecutor's office. They were married in college, a year after the relationship and that dorm room meeting. Catherine had convinced her that Ray was good, of course, but he was dapper and pays her. Her mother didn't take the journalism profession seriously. What kind of work is it to gather gossip? Like plowing in a factory or sowing grain, that's a job. She snorted when Linda came to visit at weekends and raved about her boyfriend. Ray was not what he seemed at first glance, nor was he what everyone else saw him as. He could be caring and sensitive, and even restrained his desire to pick at everything. At the same time, remained the soul of the company, a noisy lighter. Many girls openly envied Linda and openly glared at Ray when they appeared at the institute. There's nothing to see here, Catherine waved her hands at them. You're not here for the ballet. Shoo. Although she had initially opposed Linda and Ray's relationship, she soon became an ardent defender of their peace of mind and was even a bridesmaid at the wedding. Not without pride, she told the guests that without her the young people would not have met. It might have seemed that Catherine simply had nothing to do. But how wrong were those who thought so? The backwoods fashionista had affairs with 2 or 3 at a time. Never a dull moment in the evening. Sometimes she chose from several candidates and was not ashamed to use her natural beauty. Those problems that she herself did not want to solve suitors. So Catherine had finished her studies, not really knowing what she was studying for. She got her medical degree as a working makeup artist. She did not go to any residency and settled in a beauty studio, having mastered in addition to makeup, hair, and other beauty procedures. From boredom, or from flightiness, married and 6 months later divorced. Another year fluttered on dates and married again. Catherine wasn't lazy, she was just lucky. She was also never shy about doing things that others disapproved of. That's why she won where others failed. Linda sometimes thought that her road was straight and quiet, where you could see all the stops and bumps for miles ahead. Catherine's road, on the other hand, wiggled like a snake and pitted or went under the clouds. The important thing was that eventually they both ended up with a destination. The tea was getting cold. Linda was already thinking of calling her friend, who was almost an hour late, when she heard a fuss in the entrance and a call. "Can you believe it, you bastard?" The client was late. She held me up. Then the taxi was still running. Catherine started to get indignant. Linda only smiled. They hugged. It couldn't have been any other way. In the past few years, Catherine had changed from a strange backwoods girl with ambitions into a genteel city beauty. She had a bob haircut, was always wearing makeup and fashionably dressed. And she was more concerned with a new skirt and going for a massage than having groceries at home. "Oh, you cooked for Ray." Catherine, barely passing into the kitchen, immediately stuck her nose in the pots on the cooker and in the fridge, and she has borscht and stuffed cabbage and compote. Linda did not chase after brands and hairstyles. She dressed minimalistically and simply. But she knew how to keep things cozy and on time. "Harry's nagging at me because I don't cook," Catherine complained. "Everyone has their talents," Linda reassured her as she poured tea. The friendly chat went on late into the night. It was always like this when they met. The cake was almost over and Linda was making coffee for the third time when Ray finally came home. The young editor was disheveled and twitchy. He came into the kitchen to say a quick hello, hugged his wife and retired to his room, saying he'd had a hard day. "Why is he so sour?" Catherine asked, after a glance at the man. "He must be tired." Linda shrugged her shoulders. "I can't force him to sit down at the table." Come on. Catherine jumped up from her chair and reached for her friend's shoulder. "What is this?" She picked up a red hair with 2 long fingernails and showed it to the stunned Linda. She stopped in surprise. Maybe it was an accident? "Yeah. Say it was blown in by the wind. I'm a friend of men. I know them like the back of my hand. He came in tired, with someone else's hair on, and he's working hard, poor man." "What are you implying?" "That he..." Linda looked round the room. "I'm not implying anything yet, but I have the fact on my fingers." Catherine shrugged her shoulders. "We need to watch him. Think back. Maybe you had something strange going on." Linda thought about it. Her friend's suspicions had shifted the bricks of her inner fortress just a little, but it was enough to make the building shake. Ray had replaced in Linda the father she had been deprived of. He became both friend and husband at once. The first years they lived soul to soul, understood each other without words, and as if a whole universe was formed in the merger of 2 dissimilar characters. Then they experienced several crises in their relationship. There were quarrels, as with everyone, but they quickly became the past. For the last year they lived a very measured relationship, but loaded professionally. Both worked hard to achieve their goals. Maybe they started to socialize less. "Is everything okay in bed?" Catherine questioned her. "Well, maybe because of the work became a little less." "Yes," agreed Linda. "Yes, what are you bothering at all? There is one hair, and already panic." "Her hair is where it all starts." Catherine raised her finger authoritatively. "I advise you to go through his pockets, sniff his shirts and his laptop too." "I'm not going to sniff his shirts. What's the big deal?" Linda was indignant, although subconsciously doubts were already clinging to her. "And also go to his workplace. Maybe they have a red-headed student trainee there," she said in a conspiratorial whisper. Catherine said in a conspiratorial whisper. They chatted for a while and Catherine went home. "Yes, Lindochka, I almost forgot. My salon will celebrate the anniversary of the opening. Come with Ray. You're my regular at the Willow and Bath Cafe next week, Friday." "We'll come." Of course, Linda nodded. "Smell the shirts." Catherine winked at her, sent her a kiss and disappeared into the lift. Involuntarily, but Linda began to look at her husband. Until Catherine's words, she had never thought to accuse him of cheating. Of course, this fact was vaguely believable, but still. One evening, Linda went through her husband's things. "God, what am I doing?" she asked herself when she actually sniffed the collar of Ray's favorite shirt. It didn't smell suspicious, and there was no hair either. Linda calmed down and put Catherine's words out of her mind. Catherine is Catherine, and her Ray is not like that. She had long ago accepted his job and the need to socialize with loads of people in a day. Whoever her husband might have had a meeting with. It's all nonsense. Ray, we're all right, aren't we? Linda asked on the way to the cafe. She didn't know why she asked. The inner restlessness hadn't completely gone away. Ray turned to her. Yes, why are you suddenly asking? Why am I asking? Linda wondered. You can't tell me Catherine found the hair. You've been away at work lately. We don't talk much, she said. Lindochka, you know that I have a lot of things to do and responsibilities every day. Soon I'll get an assistant and relax a little. Ray smiled at her. Oh, here we are. Catherine was already waiting for them at the entrance. Apparently drunk and in full battle color, she was friends with the owner of the salon and had even bought a small share of the business from her, so she could invite anyone to the party. Linda sometimes wondered where the careless Catherine got the money for such a thing, but the mystery remained a mystery. The mini corporate party was a lot of fun. The women's company was diluted by a few men, the owner's husband, the masseur's boyfriend, and Linda's and Catherine's husbands. Linda didn't know her friend's new husband. She had only seen him at the wedding and couldn't remember where he had come from. Harry looked frankly bored, constantly attached to glasses of champagne, sighed, and very sluggishly participated in the general celebration. The hostess raffled off certificates for free treatments among the guests. Linda successfully won one of them and hurried to please her husband, who went outside for a smoke. She jumped out of the door and looked around puzzled. The only person outside was Catherine, who was on the phone. Have you seen Ray? Her friend asked her. Catherine put the machine away in her purse. Linda, while you participated in the raffle, your husband doused his trousers with wine and went to change, she shouted. And we, came delivery of new manicure tables. Idiots, they mixed up the days. I'm going to go to the salon to get them so Miranda doesn't freak out. Ciao, Linda. I'll be right back. Have fun. Catherine jumped into a taxi and sped away. Puzzled, Linda dialed Ray, who confirmed that he had doused his trousers, would change and be back soon. Miss me? She heard a voice from behind her. Harry emerged from the doorway. Linda answered it automatically. No. They said hello very crumply for the first few minutes. The girl wondered why her husband had not warned her and left so hastily. Let's talk, shall we? I don't know anyone here but you, and there's nothing to talk about with these chickens from the salon. They're all talking about manicures and new hair colors. He yawned tiredly and flicked his lighter. Come on, Linda agreed, realizing she was in a similar situation. Harry asked about his work, his habits, his studies, but only when he was talking about himself. He complained about Catherine, either explicitly or implicitly. Linda realized he was drunk, but for some reason she listened. She'd never talked to someone in such a way about her friend, as if she'd been given a glimpse into a secret suitcase. She cooks once a week, and then some rubbish that's impossible to eat, and I'm used to home-cooked food. My mom was a cook all her life, Harry sighed. You work here from morning till night. You want borscht, tea, cutlets, pies, and she'll buy salads or dumplings, dear. Ugh. But she puts on makeup for 3 hours. Why did you get married then? Cautiously switching to you, asked Linda. She's beautiful. She's so beautiful. You can't take your eyes off her. When I saw her, everything, the veil covered my brain. But now you realize that you can't eat beauty alone. Harry finished smoking, moved closer and whispered. And I gave her money for a share in that damn salon for some reason. I thought she'd stop hanging around there herself. She'd be home to manage and earn an income. No way. Linda suddenly felt sorry for Harry. She realized that his rose-colored glasses had shattered inside. On the one hand, he'd seen who he'd married, and on the other hand, beauty had always fooled men. I'd like a wife like you, Linda, a calm, responsible, homely woman who's ready to raise children. Not plaster chickens in front of the mirror, Harry said, looking into her eyes. Linda was taken aback and pulled her fingers out of Harry's hands, which he had already managed to grab. I don't think that's a good idea, the girl cut him off. We should have gone back inside a long time ago. She turned and walked quickly into the cafe. Her heart was pounding frantically, her head was full of bewilderment and shame, her ears were ticking. Linda sat down in her seat at the table, and poured half a glass of wine. "Shall I tell Catherine what happened?" the complaints, Harry and the fat hints. "She'll start questioning him. They'll have a fight, have to stir it all up again." "No, let them deal with their own problems and each other." Linda took a swig of her drink and reached for a sandwich. For some reason, she felt sick to her stomach, and she wanted to hug Ray, but he had disappeared. She phoned. Her husband said he was almost there, but he was stuck in traffic, and finally he walked into the cafe in jeans and a t-shirt. About 10 minutes later, a panting Catherine burst in, desperately arguing on the phone with someone. "What kind of idiots are these? This is not a company, this is a quiet horror. Not only did they come on the wrong day, but they almost hurt me." She pointed to a barely visible bruise on her elbow and an abrasion on her forearm. "I'm sorry it took so long." Linda Ray hugged her from behind. "The traffic would drive you crazy." "Why didn't you warn me?" Linda asked the girl. "I was standing in the middle of the hall with, pardon me, wet trousers. I don't have time to talk." I hurried to the car and rushed to change my trousers. Ray waved his arms guiltily to the sides. Nearby, Catherine continued to make noise and indignation. Linda calmed down a little when she felt her husband's hand on her arm. On the other side of the table sat a silent Harry, glaring at her through the wall of a clear glass. A few days passed. Linda was finishing up her work at the clinic. She was in a good mood. Her last 8-year-old patient had been a delight to her with his bravery and resilience. He even hugged the doctor's aunt goodbye. And under his mum's proud, embarrassed gaze, he said, "Thank you." Of course, Linda could not just let the little hero leave the office, and handed him a brand new toothbrush, which was left by the brand representative for promotional purposes. The young doctor had already said goodbye to all her colleagues and was standing at the door when the phone in her pocket rang. "Linda, help me out." Catherine's voice came through the phone. "Come as a model. My student and I need to practice, and the model is sick, the bastard." "Now?" Linda was surprised. "Yes, it's urgent." Catherine begged. "Okay, I'll be right there." The girl hung up the phone. Linda often helped her friend. It was not difficult and pleasant. After all, she always came home with beautiful makeup and styling, and Catherine's training was not disrupted. It took Linda about half an hour to get to the salon. She was already waiting, sat in a chair, and under the popular tracks of the radio airwaves, Catherine and her student began to work. The girlfriend was scattered in another round of thanks and scolded the irresponsible model student who didn't show up. When the work was done and the student went home, Catherine suggested that Linda stay and have a cup of coffee. It turned out very well. Catherine looked at the makeup and said, "She's a smart girl. Maybe something good will come out of her." Linda clapped her eyelashes theatrically, turning one side and then the other. At the same time, she caught a glimpse of the old manicure tables. Linda wouldn't have confused them. She'd been to Catherine's workplace so many times she'd already memorized how the tables stood and on which one, how the light from the window fell. "I thought you said you were going to replace the tables." She stared questioningly at her makeup artist friend. "Where are they?" "They turned out to be defective. We sent them back." Catherine waved her hand. "What, all at once?" Linda wondered. "They all had scratched tops. I told you, idiots. Those movers were pounding them against each other like crazy." Catherine brushed the shadow off her friend's cheek with a brush. "Only spoilt our holiday in nerves." "Did they hit you with the tables too?" Linda nodded at the greenish bruise on the makeup artist's elbow. "Yeah." Catherine didn't even look at her arm. "They opened the door as if it were their home. And I got bumped for company." The friends were finishing their coffee and had long ago switched to another topic, when Catherine, who was scrolling through the news feed on her phone, suddenly jumped in. Linda looked. She shoved a machine with a picture open on the screen to Linda's nose. The girl looked at the picture and hesitated. The photo was of the entire staff of the agency where Ray worked. The guys were with some certificates in their hands, apparently another award from the big shots. But another interesting thing was that a young red-haired girl was standing next to Ray. "Aha!" Catherine shouted triumphantly. "I told you so, I told you so." I told you so, Linda said, looking at the photograph. I felt sick to my stomach. The nasty feeling from her conversation with Harry and the homespun excitement of finding the red hair again. It's okay, Linda, we'll expose him. Catherine clenched her manicured fingers into a fist, if anything. You'll be the first to file for divorce. What divorce, Catherine? Linda jumped up like a flaming rock. It's not even clear yet. It's as clear as day, dear. Your friend folded her arms authoritatively across her chest. Your ray's gone off and we've got to go over there and pull that redhead's hair out. Right. Linda clenched her hands on her temples. I don't believe in this nonsense. Okay, Catherine agreed. Watch him very carefully this week. Men always get caught up in the little things. I will. Linda nodded. She was tempted to give Catherine a hint about Harry's behavior, but she didn't. Resentment could make a mess of things, especially since Catherine was just drawing her own conclusions. A little obsessively, but for now there was no one to take offense at, and nothing to take offense at. Ray was on his usual behavior. Linda, teased by Catherine's confidence, began to surreptitiously watch her husband, something she usually never did. Linda, until that day, had thought that there was no point in restricting the freedom of a partner, forbidding something, scandals or jealousy scenes. She had realized this when she was still a student, although she loved Ray very much, admired him as a man, as a human being. The more control, the higher the probability of the opposite effect, and to arrange emotional swings with a choleric sanguine like her husband, a noisy and dangerous task. Scenes and emotions to that was enough at work. At home wanted to be calm. He said so himself. During the day, the young editor is a chameleon to adjust to anyone who got to his office, and in the evening, at home wanted to be himself. Feeling like a delinquent schoolgirl, Linda rummaged through her husband's rucksack, his notebook, while he was in the shower. She found a list of phone numbers and women's names on the pages of the notebook and a strange pink-colored pen in his jacket pocket. Her heart pounded, thudding in her ears, as if it had been covered with a bucket. Linda, what are you doing? Ray stood in the doorway, looking at his wife in amazement. The girl froze with the evidence she had found in her hands. Are you accusing me of something? The man folded his arms across his chest. What is it? Linda jabbed her finger at the list of numbers. These are the candidates for the assistant position. The man shrugged his shoulders indifferently. I interviewed them last week. I put them all here. Why? Did you use this? Linda waved a pink girl's pen in the air. First my own. Then I ran out of paste and Kira lent me her writing utensils. What's the problem? Why are you going through my stuff? Ray looked round at the slight mess on the desk. Nostrils dilating, Linda felt like a fool. She mumbled something under her breath, slipped the notebook and pen to her husband, and went into the kitchen. His explanations were very convincing, but the worm of paranoia continued to gnaw its way into her thoughts. Linda squeezed her temples with her hands and sat down at the table in the kitchen. She grabbed her phone and texted Catherine about what had happened. The makeup artist didn't believe her friend's husband's excuses and suggested that she follow up with him to be sure. Linda looked at her schedule, figured something out, and texted back. Come on. Linda went to bed late. Ray was already having his 10th dream when she finally settled down. Before that, she stared at her sleeping husband's face for a long time, trying to find answers to the questions that tormented her. In the morning, she pulled herself together, pretended that nothing had happened, walked Ray to work, and waited for Catherine. Her friend arrived just as Ray drove out of the yard. You ready? Catherine's voice had a poorly concealed excitement, as if she'd been waiting a long time for permission. Do I have a choice? Larissa looked at her as she buckled her seatbelt in the car. Well, you might not like what you see if you see anything. Catherine corrected herself, shrugging her shoulders. But I'd rather not see anything, of course. He's a little distant, Linda murmured as they caught up with Ray on the road and pulled a few cars ahead of them. He seemed fine, but something was wrong. That's how it starts, Catherine nodded, looking down the road. First they get cold feet and then they start lying. Our feminine instincts can't be fooled. Did your previous husband cheat on you? Linda suddenly blurted out for some reason. Katya jerked slightly at the wheel, so surprised by the question. Bill might have cheated, she said uncertainly, but I didn't care anymore. I went out on a date, and I realized I was sick of Bill. Yeah, I felt sorry for him. I didn't tell him, and when he got bored, I filed for divorce. Aren't you afraid that Harry might cheat on you? Linda barely restrained her impulse to spill the truth. Harry? Please. Catherine waved her hand, instantly relaxing. He's in love with me like a dog, always waiting for me. He's not that in love. Linda muttered under her breath so Catherine wouldn't hear. They pulled into the car park outside Ray's work. His car was already there. It was going to be a long ambush. Catherine promptly ran to the nearest stall for coffee and scones. It took until lunchtime to doze in the car. Catherine nudged Linda in the shoulder as Ray came out of the agency with the red-haired girl from the photo. They got in the car and got ready to drive out. Let's go, lovebirds, we'll get them now. Catherine muttered excitedly, twisting the steering wheel. Linda watched her husband's car with bated breath. She recognized the girl in the photo. Ray had said it was his assistant, but was it just that? The answer to that question loomed somewhere on the horizon. The editor and her companion drove down to the city utility into the stationery shop. On the whole, there were no provocative moments, except for the opening of the door. The girl carried a folder of papers, occasionally asking Ray something or answering the phone. He hardly ever took his eyes off the phone, even when he was driving. Yeah, he's holding the door for you. Catherine's eyes widened when she noticed her friend's husband's gesture of kindness. Almost always, Linda replied, following Ray with her eyes. Look, why don't you call him right now, Catherine suggested. Ask him what he's doing and see what the answer is. Linda dialed the number and waited. Ray's phone was busy, but he switched calls almost immediately and picked up. Hi, did you pick up lunch? She blurted out at his hello. No, I'll eat in the canteen. Don't worry, her husband replied in a completely calm voice. All right, Linda stretched out. How was your day? I'm traveling for work. And why are you calling? No reason. Linda sensed that her husband suspected something. I'll see you tonight, bye. Catherine listened to this conversation with her arms folded across her chest. He didn't say he was traveling with a woman. She waggled her eyebrows expressively, hiding. That's right. Her wooden confidence pierced the last shield of doubt in Linda's chest. Why the hell does he even need an assistant? Catherine clasped her hands together. Somehow he's been working on his own for 2 years, and nothing. And now all of a sudden, the ambition of the head of the brain. I don't know. Linda was staring out the window. Tired, I guess. Yeah, from work or your wife. Catherine snorted. Let's go home. Are you drinking white or red? In the evening, Ray found the 2 drunken girlfriends at home. Linda couldn't get Catherine out of the house for about an hour. She was asking for a drink. She was hugging. She was hugging. She was losing something in her bag. Eventually, Harry arrived and took his rambunctious wife himself. He cast a glance at Linda, full of interest and question, and they left. Now her husband seemed to Linda the best and most innocent of men. She fell dreamily asleep, hugging her pillow and whispering something to it with just her lips. Ray sat in the chair and waited for his spouse to fall asleep. He did not scold her, did not lecture her, only set the alarm clock, put a couple of loose pills on the table, and put a glass of water. Then he went out, standing on the threshold of the room as if in doubt, but the second confusion lasted only a moment. The man glanced at Linda, nodded to himself, and closed the bedroom door. Linda became nervous and twitchy. She began to be late for work. For the first time, she snapped at a patient who traveled to her from across town. Linda, maybe you should take a holiday? Sympathetically asked the admin girls at the front desk. Maybe I will, replied the doctor, wrinkling her forehead tensely. She began to notice a cooling in her and Ray's relationship. He hugged her dryly, he forgot the usual little things, or he dropped her calls and called her back. Linda remembered the way the other female students looked at him during their studies. Ray always stood out. He was stately, charismatic. had a great sense of humor and a sharp mind. Next to him, she, no, but felt sometimes that she was falling short. Over the years, Ray had not lost any of his appeal, and even became even brighter. You've got a payday today. Go to the shopping center, buy yourself something, a dress, shoes, and your mood will improve, advised Linda. It was a good idea. In this turmoil, she had almost forgotten that it was the height of summer, and she didn't have to be cramped with stupid jeans and notorious t-shirts. Linda called Catherine and suggested that they go shopping together after work, but her friend said she was busy and refused. In the shopping center, the windows were full of sale posters. Mannequins towered between the rows of clothes. Linda remembered what trousers and styles of dresses Catherine had advised her the day before and began to walk along the racks. After choosing a few options, she went to the fitting room. What a nice surprise she heard behind her when she came out to assess her outfit in the large mirror in front of the booths. Linda turned around and saw Harry. The man had wandered into the mall, apparently for the same reason she had to update his wardrobe. Well, what a surprise. Linda grumbled, "Hello, Harry. The dress fits perfectly." He gave her a thumbs up, "Don't even think about it." This time he was fresh and had a positive attitude. The old memories that had come alive with his appearance slid unpleasantly down my back. "Linda, I wanted to apologize," Harry began, putting his hands behind his head shyly. "I got drunk in that cafe out of nervousness and fatigue, talking rubbish. I'm sorry, I acted like a complete prick." Linda was surprised, pleasantly surprised. "Okay, it happens. What are you doing here?" She glanced round the shop, as if confirming the question. "I closed a nerve-wracking deal at work, exhaled, and decided to buy something I'd been wanting for a while." Harry nodded at the bag from the hardware shop, and the new jeans are a bonus. Linda looked at the jeans appraisingly. "You take them too, don't think twice." She smiled slightly. Even this sudden company in the form of Harry was somehow to her liking. Maybe it was a distraction from her obsessive thoughts. Maybe she needed a counselor, or maybe it was something else. "Catherine's all worked up, and she won't come with me," he said as they left the shop. "Me too, she's busy today," Linda confirmed. "How about a coffee?" Harry suggested, "or was there something else you wanted to buy?" Larissa thought that the lingerie shopping would have to be postponed, and nodded in agreement, approving the idea of coffee at the checkout. At the cafeteria checkout, she dashed over to pay herself, but Harry was the first to arrive and put a flavored drink and a small dessert in front of her, the latter of which Linda hadn't ordered. "Oh, come on. As the husband of my best friend." Harry waved his hand, "We're practically related." He didn't get a chance to say anything before he heard a text message from the bank. "What was that for?" Harry stared sourly at Linda, looking at the balance on the card. "Almost, but not relatives." The girl commented briefly. They chatted, then went back down to the shopping floors and wandered for a long time, choosing one pretty thing or another. Linda sensed that Harry was enjoying himself with her. He didn't turn on that whiner in the cafe anymore, but was cheerful and somehow relaxed at the same time. He talked about all sorts of funny situations at work, reminiscing about old friends and years of schooling. There was even room for a story about his childhood and Harry's fun holidays as a first grader in a small town. Listening to all of this, Linda did the most important thing. She took her mind off the intrusive thoughts of her husband's outings. She had to get home. It was nearing evening and Linda hailed a taxi as they stood at the entrance to the shopping center. "Thanks for the company at the mall," Linda smiled as the car pulled up. "Thank you for the pleasant walk. Maybe we can do it again sometime?" Harry opened the taxi door for her. "It's probably not the right thing to do," Linda hesitated. Harry gave her a quick peck on the cheek and said, "Well, you're a big girl. It's time you prioritized what's right." Linda drove home dazed, outraged, and flattered, a rattling mixture of all the emotions of the last few days. Resentment towards her husband, worry about their private life, irritation, and into all of it sprinkled sparks of innuendo from Harry. It wasn't right. It wasn't nice that she was having coffee with her best friend's husband, who was making ambiguous hints to her for the second time. Why? Well, of course she knew why. She knew that she loved Ray. She knew that she valued Catherine as a friend and loved one, and she knew that she wasn't ready to go for what Harry was veiledly offering her. All plain and simple. But then why is she flattered by his attention? Is it not compensation for a grudge from Ray? How long has it been since he spent almost half of his day off with her? The more Linda thought about it, the more the questions became, leading her into the wilds or to an unpleasant crossroads. Tomorrow I'll talk to Ray straight, Linda decided, and I'll tell Catherine the truth about her husband. That'll be the right way to prioritize. The next day Linda had few patience, so she got off early after work. On the way she received a call from a nervous Ray, asking her to bring the work phone she had forgotten at home. On the way she thought about the best words to say to her friend and her husband. She decided to start with the first one. She dialed Catherine's number and proposed to meet in the evening. The makeup artist happily sang into the phone about her agreement and even asked if she should dress up. "No, we'll just sit around," came the reply. As Linda entered the flat, she heard Ray's work phone ringing. She picked it up from the mirror in the hallway and glanced absently at the screen. There were about 10 missed calls. "Will computers? Information bridge," Linda mumbled, flicking through the screen on her smartphone. She was already getting into a taxi when a text message sent around 1 o'clock in the morning caught her eye. "I missed you, my affectionate boss. Looking forward to tomorrow." Linda felt as if she had been splashed with cold water. There it was. Her suspicions, here in her hands on the screen of her husband's phone. Tears welled up in her eyes, her nose stung, and her throat was filled with rage and jealousy. Linda caught her own gaze in the rearview mirror and was taken aback. She was looking at an angry and deceived woman who wanted revenge and justice. All plans to talk to her husband were forgotten in a moment. "Boss," Linda hissed, clutching the phone so tightly that it almost cracked. The taxi driver involuntarily glanced at the passenger. He could sense with his spinal cord that something was going on behind him. The only thing the girl managed to do before jealousy finally drowned her in its cauldron was to write down the number the text message had been sent from. Linda burst into the agency's office with flaming cheeks. The staff said hello to her, but the girl didn't hear. She yanked Ray's office door open to the astonished stares, but it wouldn't budge. "Ray," at lunch, said a fellow journalism student timidly, emerging from the right. He was the first one to catch Linda's furious gaze. "We'll wait for him here." Linda glanced angrily at the assistant's empty chair next to the office and plumped down in her chair, tapping her fingers on the desktop. The whole office stared at her with a mixture of fear and bewilderment. Someone had apparently called Ray on the sly, and he came rushing in a few minutes later. "How's it good, sweetheart?" Linda got up from her chair and angrily shoved the phone screen with the message into his nose. At the same time, she glared angrily at Kira, who was frozen in the doorway behind the boss with a stack of documents. "Linda, what's the gig?" Ray tried to pull his wife into the office. "Come on, let's talk calmly." Linda pulled out of her husband's arms and expressively raised her hand with the phone, showing it to the whole office. "Know why? I want everyone to know what a wonderful person you are." She emphasized the word wonderful, a decent boss and a faithful husband. Ray clutched his head, feeling Spanish shame for his wife. "And you should be," Linda pointed her finger at a stunned Kira, "ashamed of yourself for messing around with a married man." "Linda, stop it." Ray grabbed his wife in an arm and dragged her forcefully into his office. Let me go, you traitor." Linda lashed out, hitting her hand on the door. Annoyed Ray sat his wife in his chair and loomed over her. "What did you do? And even if it's such an emergency, why the show? What are you trying to accomplish?" Linda looked at him with eyes red with rage and tears. She shoved the work phone and the message on it in her husband's face again. "How do you explain this? Sleeping with your young assistant, huh? That's it. The old wife is no longer honored." "Linda, have you lost your mind?" Ray rubbed the bridge of his nose and exhaled. Somebody obviously got the wrong number in the heat of the moment. I even know Linda crossed her arms over her chest, That red head with the hair you come home with. Jesus, don't you have anything better to do than look for other people's hair on my shirts? Ray rolled his eyes. Find something more productive to do. And Kira has a fiancé, just so you know. And you call your Kira's number, and we'll find out if she's wrong or not. Linda demanded with clenched fists. Everything inside her was boiling with rage and responded with a new wave to every phrase of her husband. Her back was soaked, her cheeks and forehead were burning. Ray picked up his work smartphone and pressed the speakerphone during a call. The answering machine's electronic voice came through the receiver. It rang several times, but to no avail. That doesn't prove anything, Linda said. Linda, go home. Please stop embarrassing me in front of my subordinates, Ray asked in a very firm, quiet voice, turning away to the window. The girl felt that her claims were being ignored, that it was as if everyone was laughing at her in her voice without being embarrassed about it. Why did it say the word supervisor? She threw back at Ray, grabbing the doorknob. I have no idea. As if there weren't enough bosses in town, Ray replied without turning around. Linda stepped out of her husband's office, and a dozen curious eyes stared at her. She walked briskly down the corridor, not looking at anyone, and on the way out of the building she saw Kira standing by the car park. She was being hugged and apparently comforted by some guy. Linda froze for a moment, and then shame came over her in a wave that burned her from the inside out. Tears held back for so long tore down the barrier and dripped from her eyes. It's okay. Linda. Catherine counted drops of valerian. Men, they are so dodgy, cunning, but do not cry because of it. Appreciate your dignity. She handed Linda a glass of water and a sedative. Catherine arrived as soon as she heard her friend's unintelligible voice mixed with crying. Catherine, I've embarrassed him. She took the glass with a shaky hand, and him and me. I'm anticipating a story on their website editor's sleep-deprived ex-wife breaks into office. Oh my God, that's embarrassing. Linda was in tears again. She hadn't been able to calm down for about an hour. Well, Catherine said, at least you're remembered. Why do you have to go there anyway? I'm such an idiot. Linda leaned into her friend's shoulder. We're all a little bit stupid. Catherine gently put her palm on her head. Why did you call me this afternoon? Linda realized that she couldn't handle another confrontation today. I just wanted to chat, she said, maybe go shopping. Well, we're not going out now. No foundation can hide your puffy eyes. I'm telling you as an expert. Catherine raised her finger to the ceiling, which made Linda smile a little. What are you going to do about Ray? I don't believe in random messages. I don't know, maybe I'm just really paranoid. Linda leaned back against the sofa and stared at the ceiling. If so, I should apologize. I'd still dig. Catherine did not stop. It would be reckless of him to sleep with his almost secretary. It's like a joke situation. There's someone else, that's for sure. I'll talk to him, Linda breathed out, if I could. For some reason, she dialed the number she had copied from her husband's phone again. And once again it was answered by the monotonous muttering of an electronic robot. Ray came home late that evening, but Linda still waited for him. Her husband looked at her glumly and, without a word, left for the shower. Ray, I'm sorry. Linda waited for him in the room. The man walked past her, shaking his head. I'll forgive you, Linda, but my reputation is ruined by your tantrum today. There'll be whispers behind my back, and I gave Kira the day off. I was wrong, Ray. Linda stared sorrowfully at the floor. I'm so ashamed. I was so ashamed. Ray sat down on the other side of the couch. You've turned into some kind of paranoid neurotic, haven't you? Going through my things, sniffing my hair, doing this and that, because of some stupid mistake by some stranger, whoever the hell she is. It just seemed to me that our relationship had grown cold, Linda murmured quietly. When it seems, darling, it's customary to cross yourself, Ray muttered. You're playing the jealous wife, aren't you? The idea had failed. But Catherine said. Linda began. Oh, you and Catherine should be in the yellow ward together with ideas like that. Her husband came at her again. She doesn't know what she's listening to. She can't see what's under her nose, but she's giving you the best advice. She herself has a husband who walks left and right. All of a sudden, Ray stopped halfway through the sentence. It looked as if he'd said something unnecessary, and now he was trying to figure out how to put it back. Linda's ears perked up. Anyway, the man squeezed the bridge of his nose with his fingers and closed his eyes. Take a sedative and don't talk to Catherine about any of this nonsense. She's a bad influence. Ray got up and left the room, signaling that the conversation was over. Linda was left sitting alone in the dark, confused and full of doubt. Ray knows something about Harry but keeps quiet, male solidarity or something. And why is he suddenly so against Catherine? The tormented Linda paid no attention to her husband's real coldness and his blatant unwillingness to address the problem and forgive her. A week passed. Life went on as usual. The head doctor of the clinic informed Linda that she and 2 other young dentists were going to a 3-day conference in another city. The girl was even a little happy about this turn of events. It might help her take her mind off her worries, although outwardly no one would have found any reason to do so in Linda's life. Her husband was friendly to her. Catherine still called and chattered like a magpie about everything. The patients hadn't decreased. But behind the outer mask of normality was the affable coldness of her husband, a girlfriend drowned in rhinestones, and a job that suddenly became exhausting and drained all her energy. Linda could never find the strength to talk to her friend about her spouse. She had no proof on her hands except her own words. No, enough with the suspicions. I'd better get my own family in order first. Ray agreed that the trip would be good for his wife and even bought her a train ticket. Go listen to some smart guys and aunts, go for a walk, and get all the nonsense out of your head, he told Linda as she packed her traveling bag. The train was tapping its wheels. The girl rarely traveled by train, and each time it was a bit of a novelty. Colleagues were arguing animatedly nearby to the clinking of the glass of the cup holders. Maybe Ray's right, I am paranoid. He and I have been together since we were 18, and there's never been any occasion, Linda thought, looking out the window at the passing railway stations and Christmas trees. And the amount of stares at him at uni, I didn't care then, well, hardly. Yes, it's all Catherine's way of panicking herself and others. Whether it was the monotonous choo-choo-choo that chased away the bad thoughts or the atmosphere of the journey, Linda was in a pleasant mood. She put her head down on the iron and freshly laundered linen. I'll be back and we'll definitely go to Grandma's in Iowa, Linda decided and closed her eyes. Training in the company of the sea and the sun really did the girl good. In the morning, she and her colleagues listened to seminars of experienced doctors and presentations of new materials for work, and in the afternoon they went to the beach to sunbathe and swim. The sea climate and fresh air seemed to erase her worries from her mind. Linda thought about how she would return home, how she would tell Ray about the trip, how the 2 of them would go to the place where the malachite was mined. It's a shame Catherine isn't with me, the girl thought as she watched the waves. She said she hadn't been to the sea for a couple of years. Linda really wanted to share her peacefulness with her loved ones. After all, her colleagues were only colleagues. On the 3rd day, the organizers said that the last speaker couldn't come due to illness, apologized to the participants and informed them that the training was closed. Linda decided not to stay one more day in the hotel with the others, but bought a ticket on the same day and went home. Here's a surprise for Ray, I'll be home early. And with a tan too, she smiled as she looked out the window at the sea. The train arrived at its destination early in the morning. On the journey, Linda had a nice chat with her neighbor and her grandson of 9 years. Granny treated the girl to fruit and enjoyed listening to her stories about work, recalling her own youth. The morning city was just waking up, washed by the night rain. It was not as warm as the sea, and even a little fresh. Outside the window of the taxi passed sleepy alleys and early joggers. In the alleys, the first rays of sunshine dispersed the foggy remnants, played in the puddles and glimmered drops on bushes and tree branches. The taxi driver helped her unload her bag, wished her a good day, and drove off to his new passengers. Linda thought about how she would go up to the flat, go in quietly and get into bed with Ray asleep. How nice that today was her husband's day off and they would be able to sleep through lunch together, then make coffee and talk about the upcoming trip. Linda quietly turned the key in the lock so as not to wake Ray. Quietly, she walked into the flat and as soon as she saw the familiar corridor, she was dumbfounded. All the good cheer she'd brought with her from the sea had gone down and shattered into tiny pieces. Her heart pounded like the wheels of the train that had brought her back here. There were shoes lying in the corridor that she would have recognized out of 100. They'd bought them together last year and had picked up the last pair in town. The shoes were Catherine's. By the mirror, however, Linda saw her keys and the same painfully familiar car fob. For a moment, a childish, naive thought crept into her head. Maybe something's happened and Catherine's come to ask for help. But the thought was immediately suffocated by the falling curtain of obviousness. From the bedroom, Linda heard soft voices. It seemed to her that her heart was pounding so that the neighbors could hear her. The girl crept quietly to the door and froze, listening to what was going on behind it. I almost talked him into buying me the salon outright from Miranda. A familiar female voice sounded. Will you get a divorce as soon as the deal is official? The husband's voice answered him. The same day. When are you going to file the papers? I'm thinking of what to tell her, followed a sigh. The idea of a fake affair has failed. It failed because someone left their work phone at home, the woman's voice interrupted. I've been working her as hard as I can. A little bit more, and she would have filed for divorce herself. We would have come out dry. And now you either have to talk to her head on, or think of something else. In the forehead is a pity. I don't like her as a woman, but as a human being, I pity her. And it is not a pity to make a show, smirked a female voice. I choose the lesser of two evils, said the male voice. Linda clamped her hands over her mouth and felt the corners of her eyes grow wet. A wave of cold swept down her back, her cheeks felt hot, and her throat felt like it was being squeezed by invisible hands. Her realization fell in pieces, and each was nastier than the last. It burned, drained away all the good inside, like acid. Ray, you and I tried it back in college, but you were too right then, and I was too stupid. But if it had worked, then, Catherine's voice sounded quietly, but ingratiatingly, might not have been these long years with a bore from the dentist. My husband might not have been there, and now everything would be easier, and we'd be living somewhere abroad by now. If everything works out, it will Ray confirmed. We'll run the salon remotely. You run the salon and I'll run the agency. Linda felt the tears wet her t-shirt and imprinted hot drops on her chest. We'll be gone, and they might have something with Harry. I've seen the way he looks at her, he chuckled from behind the door. I've seen the way he looks at her. She's the perfect girl for Linda. She loves dumplings, borscht, and watching soap operas at night. She's always been a little short for you. She loves her job and doesn't like herself very much, said Ray. We live like neighbors. I'm tired of the homegirl who always has everything planned. I feel like an old man around her. I want something different. I know what you want, Ray. What do you want, Ray? Catherine cooed. From across the room there was a commotion. Linda sat against the wall outside the door, shaking with shame, pity, disgust, resentment, and betrayal of the two people she thought were closest to her, after her mother. The last bit of realization poured out. The cup was empty. The cold hands of reality finally closed around her throat. She jumped up and flung herself out of the flat in what she was wearing. The street, the morning, Linda ran away from the shame and disgrace she had lived in for so many years. She was disgusted with her own existence. She wanted to forget, to erase her memory. She wanted to go back 10 years, to pull her hand out of Catherine's fingers, to send the smug, insolent man to the dormitory. Every year that passed was like a rod whipping her in the back, leaving deep wounds and triple the pain that came on more and more. Tears welled up in her eyes. Everything was cloudy and barely recognizable. She stopped, breathed, and ran again. She was shouted at by passers-by, but Linda didn't hear, didn't see. She wanted to hide from this vile feeling, from herself. Girl, look out, was the last shred of reality that imprinted itself on her memory before pain and darkness overrode her. The measured sounds of the PI snapped Linda out of oblivion. She also thought irritably, what was that nasty beeping sound like the trills of an electronic alarm clock from the past? Her eyes struggled to open, her body felt woozy, her right leg felt petrified and wouldn't move. My entire right side responded with painful tightening when I tried to turn around on the bed, and my head was buzzing. "Good morning. You're finally awake, Linda," greeted her by a woman in a white dressing gown. Linda looked around and only then realized she was in a hospital bed. What happened to me? She looked at the leg in a cast sticking out from under the blanket. You were hit by a car. I'm surprised you got away with a broken leg, mild concussion, and moderate bruises, the doctor replied. Looking through the documents, they pick up other people in pieces in such cases. You were born with your shirt on. Your family will be happy to know that you'll be well soon. Not all the family. Linda turned her back to the wall. Is there someone coming to call your relatives? The doctor asked. Tell my husband I was hit by a car and I'm dead. I can't go back. I don't want to see him again, and I don't want to see her, Everlinda said, without turning round. The doctor shook her head. If they come, don't let them in my room, Linda added. The hospital was dreary, but the walls with the red cross seemed to shield her from the painful thoughts of what had happened. The physical pain didn't seem to bother them much in the face of how much their souls were torn. Her mother rushed to the hospital half an hour after the call. She first cringed, then cursed, then cried at her daughter's bedside. Linda told her everything she had heard that morning. When Melissa left her daughter's room, she gave the nurses each a box of chocolates, and on pain of complaining to the head doctor, ordered her not to let anyone with names beginning with the letters R and K see her daughter. Linda blocked the numbers of her husband and the lying friend. She asked her mother and a colleague friend to collect her belongings from her husband's flat when he was away. Doctors said rehabilitation would take about 3 weeks and the fracture would finally heal in 3 months. One day there was a knock on the door of the room. Linda thought it was one of the staff, although they usually didn't bother to knock. Come in, the girl shouted, not looking away from the magazine her mom had brought. Hello, Linda, came a familiar voice. Harry stood in the doorway with a bouquet of flowers and a dressing gown thrown over his shoulders. Linda had mixed feelings when she saw her ex-girlfriend's husband. On the one hand, he reminded her of what had happened, but on the other hand, he had nothing to do with it. You don't know how hard it took me to get here, the man complained, sitting down on the edge of the bed. It's almost like they're checking IDs to get to you. That's my request, Linda nodded. Why? Are you hiding from someone? Harry joked. Maybe I am, the girl confirmed. Harry stared at her in surprise, his eyes wide with question and incomprehension. Linda exhaled and decided to tell him. She recalled everything, including Catherine's outings at the Institute, her consumerist attitude to men, and her hypocrisy under the mask of her friend. Harry listened with his mouth open. I want you not to fall victim to their game like I did. Get a divorce soon and don't listen to any pleas. Don't you dare buy the salon. Catherine is using you and has used you. Linda's done. Where did you? A stunned Harry couldn't believe his ears. They talked about it for a long time. The girl asked the man not to tell anyone where she was or what was wrong with her, and not to do anything stupid that would ruin his life. Towards the end, when Harry was about to leave, he asked, Linda, tell me, do I have a chance? Not now, she shook her head. I want to be alone. Maybe, in the future, maybe. I get it. Get well soon. I'll be stopping by if you don't mind. Harry nodded. Come over. She blinked, showing agreement. Time goes differently in a small town than it does in a big city. It's measured and quiet. The hustle and bustle is alien to those who are used to getting up to the crowing of the rooster. A light frost touched the rowan berries, which shone brightly against the snow. The snow itself sparkled in the sunlight, still fresh and unmarred by anyone's feet and paws. Granddaughter, there's a letter for you, Grandmother Emma shouted, coming into the hay and waving the envelopes. Thank you, Linda shouted from the kitchen. She was preparing a simple breakfast for herself and Grandma. It's been a long time since I've seen a letter, Grandma Emma said, sitting down on her stool. You young people are all calling now. A letter from some fiancé. She handed Linda an envelope. She took a quick glance at the sender's name and decided to read it later. After her recovery, Linda went straight to her grandmother's house in the country. She could not stay in the city, where every street reminded her of the betrayal and shame she had experienced. She quit her job, settled other minor issues, and made her mother her representative in the divorce proceedings so that she would not have to face Ray again. Out of sight, out of mind, her mother said as she saw her off. Go as far as you like and come back as often as you like. Only call me often. It was quiet in the village, where the pain began to subside and gradually recede. Time was doing its work healing the wounded soul. Her mother didn't talk about Ray and the divorce, only promised to tell me when it was all over. The envelope had an address and Harry's name on it. How he knew where to find her remained a mystery. Linda ran her eyes over the lines Harry had written about the divorce, about leaving Catherine with almost nothing. She consciously skipped that part of the letter. Dear Linda, I realize I'm probably an extra person in your life, but since that evening in the cafe, you haven't left my mind. I've made a lot of mistakes and missed a lot of chances, but I don't want to let you go. The girl paused, listening to herself. Something faintly trembled in her after those words. I'm willing to wait as long as you say. I hope for a reply, Harry. Linda folded the letter, tucked it away in an envelope, and began to twirl it in her hands. If she was still in doubt at the hospital, she knew for sure now. Grandma Emma came into the room. Do you think what to write back? Questioned the old woman, looking at the concentrated face of her granddaughter. I think that old admirers are not invited to a new—
Where did you get this? Veronica asked her daughter. She lost the power of speech for a moment, but when she tried to pull herself together, her tongue continued to disobey, and the woman's legs were shaking. She sat down on the couch, looking in horror at the gifts Selena had given her. Bought at the flea market, the girl replied, placing a vase of snow-white peonies on the table with her beloved mother's gift. The girl turned around and saw that her mother had opened the box and looked at its contents with an incomprehensible look. And what happened? What's inside, Mom? Sitting down next to her mother, she began to look at the gift. The day before, Selena had not had time to look at it properly. The wooden casket was quite old, and all of its surfaces were carved. It looked like it had once been decorated with stones, but now there were only empty hollows. Why are you so scared? Mom asked Celine. I thought you would like my gift. You love all sorts of vintage things. Daughter, look what's inside, Veronica said in a stony voice. The girl took the box from her mother's hands and looked inside. There were pictures. Taking a closer look, Selena looked at her mother incomprehensibly. They were pictures of her father, who had died in a car accident 10 years ago. But the most amazing thing was that the girl had never seen such pictures before. They were fresh photos, taken recently. How can this be, if her father has been resting in the grave for 10 years? So Dad is alive? She asked her mother. I don't understand anything either, replied Veronica, but one thing is clear. The photos were taken after his death, however unbelievable it may sound. But I was at the funeral with you. I saw how the coffin with your father's body was lowered into the grave. How you cried. Throwing a clod of earth into the grave. How could he have gotten out of there and come back to life? We have to figure it all out, Mom said. And who did you buy it from? Selena told her mother how she walked from the institute the usual way through the bazaar, where the inhabitants were selling various junk. She was immersed in her thoughts, as it was the last academic year of the university. The institute was noisy. Students gathered in clusters in the corridors, sharing news and plans. Selena stood at the window with her friend Catherine and her boyfriend Ivan. She hadn't seen the young man all summer. He was away on a job. Selena and Evan had been friends since high school. As a boy, Evan fell in love with Selena and even enrolled in the same institute with her to always be close to her. Last year, he offered her to live together, inherited from his grandmother. The guy got a small studio apartment. Housing could not be called very comfortable and prestigious, but the apartment was near the institute, and Selena's family lived on the outskirts, from which it took more than an hour to get there. But recently, they began to have frequent conflicts and misunderstandings. Evan became friends with guys and girls from the oil faculty. Most of them were from rich families, very well dressed, always had money. In an effort to fit in with his friends, Evan started working more than studying. Selena had to do his notes for him to solve problems. She reassured herself. Even works so that we have something to live on. He does it all for our happiness and well-being. Selena herself took freelance orders, working online on an old laptop she bought off the shelf. Listen, when I left, you were wearing that sweater. The guy said to Selena, I came back. You're wearing it again. You couldn't buy yourself some new clothes over the summer. Selena tried to justify herself. She didn't like Evan saying such things in front of her friend. You worked. Take more orders. The guy insisted on his rightness. You know that Selena didn't know what to say. The guy's words hurt her in her heart. Was it her fault that her family was in such distress? Was it her fault? Come on, change something in yourself, or I'm beginning to think that soon you'll go back to your mother in your hovel. Don't embarrass me in front of my friends. They make fun of me almost every day. I'm ashamed to even bring you into my company, and all the boys come there in pairs. Selena looked at Evan with bitter resentment. The guy she'd known since childhood had changed a lot over the summer. The change in him was not for the better. She realized more and more clearly that she didn't want to be around the man who said such hurtful words to her, who didn't want to understand the plight of her family and what she was trying to earn as best she could. Seeing how offended Selena, Catherine decided to interrupt this unpleasant conversation. Let's go and look at the schedule of lectures, she suggested to her friend. Probably already posted on the first floor in the hall. Let's go and look at the lecture schedule, she suggested to her friend. It's probably already posted on the first floor in the hall. Catherine took Selena by the hand, dragged her towards the stairs. On the way, she said, Well, your Evan's got a nerve. Such words to say such words. How can he only turn his tongue? He's from a simple family, and now he's playing the big boys. Selena didn't want to have this conversation. She didn't like it at all. She walked like a robot, not thinking about anything. Having rewritten the schedule into notebooks, the girls left the building of the institute. The weather outside was beautiful. It was called Golden Autumn. In the park, the yellow-red leaves of maples rustled under their feet. The air had that transparency that only happens in September. Do you need a ride? Catherine asked her friend. She knew that Selena would take more than an hour to get home. From the expression on the girl's face, Catherine understood. Today in Vanya's apartment, she will not go. No, I'll take the bus, then walk. Selena refused. The weather is great. No rain. I want to walk, think. Well then, see you tomorrow. Catherine kissed Selena on the cheek and went to the parking lot, where her new car was parked. Her friend had recently passed her driver's license, and her parents had bought her a car as a present. Catherine had offered Selena a ride, a trip to the countryside, to the river, but she had always refused. She was always busy. Selena walked down the street, unnoticeably approached a small bazaar where people were selling things, furniture, various household items. They were doing it for different reasons. Some people didn't need these things anymore, and others brought them to the flea market to get some money to live on. That's how almost all the things from their house ended up here. Mom sold something every day to feed her son and daughter. Dad died when the children were young. Selena had just started school in Harvey. You didn't know, and now you know, one of the strangers said angrily. So you have to pay it back, or do you want your children to disappear one day? He looked meaningfully at Harvey, who was playing cards on the floor, and at Selena, who had come out of the kitchen at the noise. Leave now, Mom said. I barely had enough money to bury my husband, and I had to borrow. I have no money to pay my debts, especially since I didn't take anything from you personally. It doesn't matter. The man approached Veronica, took her by the throat, breathing nastily in her face. You'll pay it back like a sweetheart, otherwise we'll burn down your apartment. The frightened woman closed the door behind the strangers, sat down on the sofa, wrapping her arms around her head. She didn't know what to do. Lately, her husband had been missing all the time. Later, she learned that he plays cards in the casino. For these purposes, takes loans and borrows in dubious offices. What are you doing? Veronica said to her husband, You're going to get us into the world. But Selena's father continued to play, again and again borrowed money, and then he died. The accident happened on a country highway. After examining the scene, the investigator told Veronica, according to preliminary data, Your husband failed to control himself on the slippery road from the rain, flew into the oncoming traffic lane. His car overturned several times and plummeted off the bridge into the river. The car was pulled out, but the man's body was not found. Most likely, he was swept away by the current. They searched for 2 months, but all was in vain. There was a sewage treatment plant downriver. If Veronica's husband's body had gotten there, it was impossible to find him. First, he was reported missing, and then they determined a different status, issuing documents that Selena's father had died. The first thing the girl's mother did when their apartment was left by the collectors, called the parking lot and asked if she could take her husband's car, which was there until the end of the investigation. She was allowed to do so. The mother sold the car for a small amount of money. When strange men came to their apartment again, she handed them a wad of bills. One of the strangers counted it and spoke through his teeth. "It's good that you tried to find money, but here is only the smallest part. Collect more, we'll be back soon. And don't you dare leave the city, we will still find you." The frightened woman put an ad in the newspaper to sell their country house. The cottage was in a great location and was expensive. Married, they built it together. The 2-story structure on a plot of 15 acres was the family's vacation spot. Here they went for the summer, so that the children could eat fresh vegetables and berries from the beds, which were carefully tended by Veronica. After selling the dacha, she again gave the money to the collectors, and a month later the woman sold a 4-room apartment in the center, bought a small apartment in an old house on the outskirts. Only this money was not enough, so from the house were sold almost all things, including services, chandeliers, furniture, even was sold some clothes. But collectors again and again demanded money. Veronica's husband owed a fabulous amount. Sometimes the woman cried, "You lie there in the grave and do not puff, and we went to the world, completely without anything left. Soon we will have nothing to feed our children," she bitterly and resentfully addressed her husband who had passed away. Having found out that her husband was playing cards and borrowing money, she tried to stop him many times. "Stop going to the casino, it will not end well," but her husband did not listen to her. In the end, Veronica gave up on him. Her children were more important to her. Harvey was just born, needed care and nutrition, and Selena went to school. Every evening with her had to study, do homework. Selena's sad thoughts were interrupted by a squeaky female voice. "Girl, buy a jewelry box." The girl looked at the elderly woman who was holding out a handmade wooden item to her. "Why do I need it?" Selena asked. "You give it to the dearest person, and he will thank you for it." Selena didn't know what the old woman was talking about, but she remembered that today was her mother's anniversary. They were not going to celebrate. The family had no extra money for birthday celebrations. But the girl's mom loved antique things, so Selena looked closely at the box. The elderly woman held the girl's hand. Her touch was unpleasant, chilled her heart, and goosebumps ran along her skin. Celine wanted to get rid of the grandmother as soon as possible. She sensed something scary in the old woman's eyes, something disturbing, inexplicable. She tried to pull her hand out, but the woman held it tightly. "This box will reveal a secret to you." What's she talking about? She's crazy, Selena thought. But the girl remembered how her mother had once stood on this spot and asked passersby to buy things from her. Maybe the grandmother has nothing to eat, so she carries things to the bazaar from home to get some money for food. Only this thought made Selena agree to buy the box. "All right," she said to the old woman, "but I don't have much money, and you must be asking a lot." "I'll take as much as you give me," she replied. The girl took out a purse from her purse, took out a few bills, and gave them to the grandmother. The woman gave her the box in return. "I didn't buy a present for my mom. I'll at least give her this box," Selena thought. On the way, she bought a bouquet of white peonies. Her mother loved these flowers that filled everything around her with their sweet fragrance. Listening to her daughter's story about the strange old woman, Veronica didn't understand what was going on. "Are you sure you've never seen this woman before?" she asked her daughter. "I'm sure I would have remembered her. She has a very expressive appearance," Selena convinced her mother. "She was a Baba Yaga, very unpleasant. I had a frost on my skin from her touch." "Mystical," her mother said thoughtfully. She took the pictures from the box again and looked at them. "I can't believe he's alive," Selena said. Maybe it's a prank. Someone decided to get on our nerves by bringing us back to the past. It's not about the past. Look, her mom handed her one of the pictures. This house wasn't there when her father died. It was a vacant lot. You should remember it. We used to pass through it sometimes when we wanted to take a shortcut from school to home. Selena looked closer. Indeed, this house had not been here before, but her father was photographed in front of it. The man was well dressed, smiling at the photographer in the camera lens. How so? The girl did not understand. He is alive and does not let his family know about it. Who did they bury in a grave in the cemetery then? Veronica and Selena sat pensively on the couch. Each was thinking about something different. The past often returns to people's lives, makes them remember old, already lost ties, makes adjustments to the present, but to resurrect the dead, that doesn't happen. However, they never saw their father dead. A coffin with his favorite things was lowered into the grave. They just had to pay tribute to the man, so that's what they did. This method of burial was insisted on by the father's mother, Selena's grandmother. Her son died. He is no longer alive, and I won't even have a place to go to the grave, she lamented, persuading Veronica to bury at least a coffin with his things. Suddenly, Harvey entered the room. "Why are you sitting there like water in your mouth?" he asked jokingly. His mother handed the boy a box of photographs. "What's this?" Harvey looked at the pictures. "That's my father." "And where did you get such pictures? I've never seen them before." "We haven't seen them either, son," said Veronica. "Selena had bought this box today at the flea market to give to me, and in it were fresh pictures of your father." "He's dead," the boy wondered. "Apparently not," Selena said. "Very much alive and looking good." "You guys look like crazy people right now." Selena's brother twisted his finger at his temple. He left the room, thinking that women were strange creatures and it was impossible to understand the logic of their thinking. Trying to distract herself from the strange thoughts, Veronica asked her daughter, "How are things at the institute?" "Everything is fine, Mommy," the girl replied. Outside, the window began to darken, but she was not going to leave. It seemed strange to Veronica. Her daughter had been living with her childhood friend Ivan for a year. They sort of had a love affair, although Selena's mom had never liked the guy. She was always haunted by the feeling that at the first chance he would betray her daughter, hurt her. After what her husband had done, Veronica no longer believed in the decency of men, considered them all scoundrels. Nor did she believe Evan when he told her that he wanted to be together with Selena, to build a family together. "I don't want to pressure you," Veronica told her daughter, "but Evan is slippery, unreliable. So he seems to love me." Selena tried to argue uncertainly with her mother. "Time will tell whether he loves you or not," the woman said wisely. She drew on her own experience. She had once thought her husband loved her too. But after what he had done to them, after his family had fallen into debt, she had not tried to look for good qualities in men. That's why she never married again. And when did she have time to look for suitors? All her worries were only about how to feed her children and what to dress them in. After her husband died, Veronica had to take 3 jobs. Collectors constantly came to their miserable apartment, bought to replace a large 4-room apartment, demanding money. Fearing for her life and the lives of her children, Veronica saved on everything to put money aside to pay off her husband's debts. But no matter how much she paid, the interest accrued again and again. The amount of the debt almost never decreased. "I'll stay with you tonight," Selena said. "I have a lot of things to think about in peace." "Of course, my daughter." Her mother hugged her. "This is your home too. Is something wrong?" In Veronica's eyes there was concern for her daughter. She was proud of her. The girl studied and worked part-time, not a penny from her mother. But now she was worried about something. With Vanya quarreled, shared with her mother Selena, he has recently become some kind of alien or something. "I do not want to moralize," said her mother, "but I assume that long together you will not be. You're a kind girl though, and when your Evan comes to apologize, you'll melt. You'll go back to him." "I'm not so sure about that," Selena said, putting the pictures of her father back in the box. "Why waste time with a man who doesn't appreciate you?" Veronica thought she had raised not only a beautiful and kind daughter, but also a great smart girl. Selena, indeed, was judicious, always thinking over every step. The girl put the box on the trumeau, thought that it was necessary to sort it all out properly. She went to the pantry, took out a cot from there, made herself a sleeping place in the small kitchen. It's so nice to be in my own home with my loved ones, she thought as she drifted off to sleep. Selena's room had long been occupied by Harvey, and her mother slept on the couch in the hall, so there was no other place to spread out but the kitchen. At night, Selena dreamed of a strange old woman from the flea market. She grabbed her by the arm, laughed loudly, and said, "You'll learn the secret of your father. It will be easier on the soul and life will get better." The girl was awakened by the ringing of the cell phone. It was Evan. Without even saying hello, he shouted into the receiver, "Where are you? Why didn't you come home? I woke up in the night and you weren't there. I was at my mom's, and this is your house, not mine." Selena replied in a sleepy voice. She thought that Evan found her absence in the night, but didn't even try to find out where his girlfriend was. What if something happened to her? What if she was in trouble? He slept peacefully through the morning, and now he's calling trying to make her look guilty. Selena sat up on the cot. "Come on, don't be stupid. Come back," the guy said insistently. "I realize I said some unpleasant things to you, but am I wrong? You've really turned into a gray moth. Shall I come get you?" "No, you don't have to come," Selena said, "and don't call again." "Fuck you." She heard the voice of an angry Vanya. The girl realized that this is not a time out to make an important decision, to take a break in the relationship. This is a breakup. She doesn't want to be around Ivan anymore, doesn't want to listen to his insults, doesn't want to be a gray moth. She was more preoccupied with other thoughts right now. Selena wanted to understand if her father was really alive. However, she almost didn't doubt it anymore. She threw on a robe, opened her laptop, and tiptoed into the hall where her mother was sleeping on the couch. Selena picked up the box of photos. She wanted to scan them and find proof on the internet that her father was alive. The scans produced 0 results, and Selena ran the scanner over and over again. Suddenly, one of the pictures was identified on a social networking site. It was the page of a woman she didn't know. Not a very young person, about 40 years old, was posting pictures with Selena's father. The girl scrutinized the strange woman's face. She had definitely never met her before, or she would definitely remember her. Who was she? Why was posting pictures of her dad? Where did she even take a picture of him? Veronica entered the kitchen. "Already awake, daughter? Good morning." The woman put the kettle on the stove, lit the gas, collect the cot, and I'll make breakfast. "Harvey has second period today. When are you going to the institute?" "I have to be home by second period, Mom," Selena answered, folding the bedding neatly and putting the cot in the closet. There was no hurry. She could eat breakfast in peace, especially since she had already missed her mother's cheesecakes with sour cream. Veronica set the table and poured tea into cups. Harvey, who had fallen asleep, rubbed his eyes and sat down on a stool, reaching for a plate of cheesecakes. "Go wash up first," his mother said. Later, waved the boy away. Veronica looked at him sternly, and the son had no choice but to wander into the bathroom. "How did you sleep, Selena?" Mom asked the girl. "Not very well," she answered. "She dreamt about that woman from the market all night. What a creepy old woman she is. In my dreams, she kept telling me about some secret." Selena told her mother that she found a page of a strange woman in social networks, that she put there photos of her father. The girl turned the laptop so that her mom could look at the screen. The woman gazed at the different pictures, flipping through the page. "I've never seen this woman," she said thoughtfully. "I certainly don't know her, and I've never seen my father before." "Who is that?" "And I don't know, Mom," answered her daughter, "but I'm determined to find out. Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep well." "And maybe you shouldn't. Try to persuade Selena, Mother. For us, he's dead. And if it's not so, then why did he not show up? Maybe he was threatened because of his debts. He was afraid of being killed." Veronica felt her resentment and anger at her husband boiling up in her. "He was alive, but he made me a widow and put me in debt. You remember how hard it was for us then, how we were deprived of a good home, a country house, how for days we ate rye bread and chowder, which had not a gram of fat, because there was nothing to buy meat with." Veronica broke apart. Sad memories came over her. Every time the bell rang in the apartment, she flinched, afraid that they would be killed or that her children would be taken away from her. Often the debt collectors came when Mom was at work. They would ring the doorbell, and Selena would grab little Harvey, hold him with one hand, and with the other she would clamp her mouth shut so he wouldn't scream, so that the strange men would think no one was home. For several years, while the mother paid off her late husband's debts, the children did not know what candy was. She had nothing to buy clothes for her son and daughter. At night, the woman sewed on an old sewing machine, restitching some clothes to dress the children. Selena did not know what beautiful dresses and heeled shoes were, and Harvey was constantly teased by the boys in the yard. The children hardly ever saw their mother. Coming from one job, she again ran away to another, making sure only that her son and daughter were at home, that they were not stolen, not kidnapped. The woman was always tired, exhausted. She did not mourn her husband, did not think about their past life together. All Veronica's thoughts were occupied with how to pay off debts. What else to do so that the collectors got rid of her, stopped threatening? To help her mother, Selena began to clean the entrances in the neighboring apartment building. 4 entrances in a 9-story building was not easy for her. In addition, cleaning took a lot of time, and the girl still had to do her homework, pick up her younger brother from kindergarten, something to feed. The penny she received for cleaning the entrances, the girl gave to her mother, and the latter bought simple products. Earlier, when they had a country house, they often brought potatoes and other vegetables from there. Now there was not even this help. The formerly prosperous family quickly turned into a beggar family. Selena didn't even go to the graduation party because she had nothing to wear. "Don't make excuses for him," Veronica said. "I warned him that playing cards wouldn't do any good, but he didn't listen to me. He always did everything his own way and didn't want to consider us. He lived for his own pleasure. I had the misfortune to marry that coward and scoundrel." "Calm down," Mom tried to interrupt Veronica Selena, but the flow of her mother's bitterness, resentment, and anger seemed to be inexhaustible. The words were pouring out of her heart, filled with worry for the children who had to endure such deprivation, fear, half-starved life. However, no matter how bad it was, Veronica always tried only for her son and daughter. She denied herself everything. Sometimes she went to bed hungry, dividing her dinner between Selena and Kolka. Several years of fear for her children, hunger, poverty. Veronica was able to get out of all this only by paying off the debt to the debt collectors. But even now, when their family is not threatened, they live very poorly. Simple furniture, an unrenovated apartment, inexpensive clothes, only the bare necessities. It was good that Selena managed to enter the institute on a budget. If she had failed the entrance exams, her mother would have had nothing to pay for her daughter's studies on a commercial basis. The girl hugged her mother. She was afraid her blood pressure would skyrocket and tried to calm her down. "I'll try to figure it all out," Selena said confidently. "I'll try to find out who the old woman was who gave you that damn box with your father's pictures in it." Selena jabbed at her laptop again. "We need to geolocate, find out where the pictures were taken," she thought. The girl was looking at a photo in the gallery on the page of a strange woman. Here she was standing next to a large, luxurious 2-story cottage. It was obvious that the woman was not poor. She was wearing fashionable clothes, beautifully styled hair with the effect of lamination. In the background was visible plot of land with a pool and a gazebo, buried in rose bushes. It turns out that her father accumulated debts, realized that her mother would not help him, faked his death and went to live with a rich woman. Selena's head began to form a logical chain that seemed unbelievable in its meanness. "It turns out so," agreed her mother, finishing the dishes after breakfast. Suddenly, Selena's laptop gave out a geolocation. It turned out that the house the beautiful woman had been photographed next to was 3 hours away from their town by train. "I'll have to go there. It's the only way I can find out something about my father. Find him and look him in the eye," Selena thought. She wrote down the address on a piece of paper, closed her laptop, and started to get ready for the institute. Leaving the house, she walked the same way, hoping to meet the old woman at the flea market. But the Baka, who looked like Baba Yaga, was nowhere to be found. Between lectures, Selena told about everything that happened yesterday to her friend Ekaterina. She listened without interrupting and then said, "You do not worry. I myself was shocked yesterday from the way Evan treats you. I thought you were in love, but in reality, He's just using you and humiliating you. Sure, he likes it when he comes home to a hot dinner and at night he gets his share of female affection. But a real man should not only receive, but also give. Your Ivan is not one of those real men. As for the story with the box, Catherine did not know how to support her friend. Told by her really was incredible, seemed unreal. I thought such stories only in the sick brain directors of various melodramas are born, smiled sadly Catherine. But apparently, and in life happens something that cannot be explained. We must try to find out all the facts. Began to share his plan. Selena once again thanked her friend for her participation. The girls kissed on the cheek and parted. Right from the institute, Selena went to the train station. She bought a ticket and went to the platform. The girl was worried. She couldn't stop thinking about what she would say to the strange woman from the rich house. Selena tried to mentally talk through everything that had accumulated, built a dialogue with the stranger, assumed her answers to the questions that worried Selena. Immersed in her thoughts, she'd almost passed the desired station. Stepping onto the platform, the girl looked around. Apparently, it was a cottage village, because the settlement did not look like a village or a hamlet. She approached a man with a suitcase and asked for directions to the street, the name of which was written on a piece of paper. "Sorry, girl." The man shook his head. "I'm not from around here. I was visiting, so I can't help you." Selena walked away from the station building towards the houses on the first street she could find. Suddenly, she remembered that in her smartphone she could download a map of the village and find the desired address. The girl sat down on a bench next to a store and started looking for the coordinates in her phone. It turned out that the house she needed was at the other end of the village. Selena walked down the street again. Despite the map she was looking at on her smartphone, she was still lost. There was no way she could figure out where she was. When she saw a woman with a stroller walking towards her, she decided to ask for help. "Hello, can you tell me how to get to this address?" She addressed the young mother. The woman stopped, still rocking the stroller, looked at the leaf. "It is very close," she said, showing the direction with her hand. "Go straight, then turn right and to the end of the street." "Thank you," Selena thanked her. After a while, she found herself at the right house. The girl recognized it. It was exactly the same as in the picture. The entrance to the plot was blocked by a high, massive gate with forged elements, and next to it was a wicket. The girl rang the bell. A beautiful woman came out of the house. From the expression on her face, Selena realized that the stranger was not very happy to see the guest. "Who are you and what do you want?" The woman began to say, "If you are going to sell me a vacuum cleaner or a toaster, go straight away. Go from day to day, no peace. Normal people do not buy anything from such passable, is not it clear? There are stores and marketplaces for shopping, and you're all wandering around the house, disturbing them with your visits." "I'm sorry," Selena interrupted her. "I'm not selling anything. Don't swear, please, and I'm sorry again for bothering you." She pulled out the photo she had taken from the wooden box, handing the woman one of the pictures. "I need to know what your connection is to this man." The girl spoke up. The woman took the photograph in her hands, looked at the image carefully. It was clear from her face that she knew him. "And why should I tell you anything?" she asked. "Who are you anyway?" "The thing is, the picture is of my father. He died tragically 10 years ago." "Dead, you say?" The woman was surprised. "But I think he's alive and doing very well." "So you know him?" Selena asked. The woman opened the gate wide and gestured for the girl to come in. "Let's go into the house." Selena followed the stranger, her heart racing. A few more minutes and she would know everything about her father. Maybe then she could understand why he had acted so shamelessly to this family, why he had made her mother suffer, abandoned her son and daughter. The woman led Selena into the house. They entered the large kitchen. What a setting, Selena thought to herself. Looking at the luxurious kitchen set, the bar counter with high chairs, outlandish appliances. "You sit down wherever you feel comfortable," the woman said, "and I'll make some coffee. Do you want coffee or tea?" "Coffee is fine," Selena replied modestly. "My name is Emma," said the woman, pouring the beans into the tank of the coffee machine. "I'm Selena. In the picture is my father. His name was Victor." "I've heard that before. You don't have to repeat it." The girl was silent, waiting for Emma to say something about her father. but the woman silently took out cups from the cupboard, preparing a flavorful drink. "When did you say your father died?" She finally spoke. 10 years ago, he was in a car accident. We buried him in a closed coffin, putting there only things. They never found the body." "Where did you get those pictures?" Emma asked. "The pictures came to me by accident. I bought the box at the market from an old woman, not because I liked it, but because she begged me to. And I thought maybe she didn't have enough money for food," Selena told me. She was silent for a while, then said in a quiet voice, "When my father died, my mother also stood at the flea market and sold things, because my brother and I had nothing to feed. I met Victor also about 10 years ago." Selena began her story. "He seemed very lonely to me. I had just divorced my husband. I needed companionship. I wanted to distract myself from the memories of separation. And then Victor came along. He seemed calm and balanced, not like my ex-husband, who regularly beat me. Because of his beatings, I can't have children now." "That's terrible," Selena said. The girl herself thought that it was true. Her father was alive, and he knew Emma. That was the key to the mystery Selena wanted to solve. "We started dating Victor," Emma continued, "and with him I forgot about the divorce and my abuser husband. Victor never laid a hand on me. We lived in my apartment downtown. I have a large apartment, combined from two on the same stairwell. But Victor kept insisting that we buy a country house, somewhere away from the city. It seemed noisy and dirty to him, you see. Of course, he wanted to go far away so he wouldn't accidentally run into our mom or his kids somewhere," Selena thought. "And you bought this house?" she asked Emma. "Yes, my father is not the last man in our region. He holds a very good position. I borrowed money from him." "Notice," she said, "a very large sum of money. That's when we bought this house, started living here. My apartment in the city was still empty. I did not want to sell it, and it is very expensive. It is not easy to find a buyer in a provincial city. You drink coffee. Do not be shy. Take sandwiches, probably hungry from the road." The woman moved the cup of coffee and a plate of sandwiches closer to Selena. The girl felt hungry. She hadn't eaten anything since this morning. "Thank you so much," she thanked Emma. "I really am starving." Chewing on a bun with cheese and sausage, she asked, "Did my father ever tell you that he had a family?" "He never said a word. I also thought it was strange that he didn't care that I couldn't have children. My ex beat me up so badly I had to have surgery, which left me infertile. But nothing. He still longed to sit in jail. My father tried, attracted all the connections, that this bastard for a long time closed." Selena realized that Emma is immersed in his own memories and leaves the topic of conversation, which was so important for the girl. "Where is Victor? I mean my father now?" she asked Emma. "He went to the neighboring village on business," the woman answered. "Do you want more coffee?" Selena nodded, moving the empty cup towards Emma. "I'm sorry, I can't offer you anything but sandwiches. Cooking isn't really my thing. Victor usually does that." Selena thought the woman was talking about some other man, not her father. Dad never stood at the stove. In fact, he didn't even make his own sandwiches or fry his own eggs. That was all Mommy's job. She suddenly decided that it was not worth beating around the bush. Emma had treated her well, so it was time to tell it like it was. "You see," Selena began her story, "we were a close-knit, well-to-do family. My little brother and I didn't need anything. But after Kolia was born, my father was replaced. I began to hear often that he raises his voice at my mother, and he was always disappearing somewhere, could come in the morning, was nervous, constantly angry. I only later learned that my father started playing cards, and this hobby turned into an addiction. It's also called gambling addiction." "Yes, it can happen," Emma nodded. She sat down across from Selena, palm resting on her chin, ready to listen. "One day, the police called my mom and told her that my dad had been killed in a car accident. More precisely, they said that his car had overturned and fallen off the bridge into the river. The investigation team and divers worked there, but they didn't find my father's body. They thought he was carried away by the current. That's how we buried him." "He was actually alive, I take it?" Emma asked. "Yes, I'm sure of it now," Celine said. She liked Emma more and more. She wanted to tell everything to this woman she had seen for the first time. "After the funeral, strange men showed up at our apartment. They were debt collectors who had come to collect my father's debts. Mom explained to them that he was not alive, But the men said that now she owed them for her husband, and if she didn't give them the money, our bodies would be found somewhere in the forest or in the river. Mom was very afraid for herself and even more afraid for Harvey and me. She sold our house outside the city, sold the apartment, collected money from acquaintances, sold things, furniture, dishes. But the amount collected wasn't enough. Collectors threatened every time. My mom started working 3 jobs, but we were still starving. Harvey was sometimes not taken to kindergarten because he had no clothes or shoes. My mom was very tired. The 3 jobs and constant hunger severely damaged her health. Did she die? Emma asked. No. Thank God. But now she's often sick. Her legs don't walk well. Her blood pressure is skyrocketing. But don't think, she doesn't complain. She did everything to keep us from starving to death and to get the debt collectors off our backs. God, that's terrible, Emma said. I'm so sorry for you and your mom. So much to go through. We're not very well off now, but we have enough to live on. My mom still works. I work part-time, and Harvey is in school. The only thing I don't understand is why my dad didn't let me know he was alive. If he was afraid for his life, that he'd be found and killed for his debts. Why did he worry about us? He faked his own death and ran away, jeopardizing the lives of the people closest to him and children who were certainly not to blame for what happened to him. Emma pressed her lips together. It was obvious that she didn't know the answers to the questions that bothered the pretty girl sitting across from her. The woman looked out the window. There's Victor, she said. A large black car pulled up to the house. The gate swung open automatically, and the car drove into the yard. A man got out. Selena recognized him as her father. He hadn't changed much in 10 years. He looked very good. Victor, we have company, Emma shouted. She probably wanted to warn Selena's father that she wasn't alone. Yes, there was a man's voice. Who's visiting? Selena's dad walked into the kitchen. She stared at him, unable to say a word. Is that you? Dad said. He went to the sideboard, took out a glass and a bottle of whiskey and poured some. Why am I not surprised? Maybe because you were always waiting and afraid that your secret would be revealed. Suddenly, Selena answered sharply. Why did you come here? Why did you find me? Asked her father. To look into your eyes, to ask why you did this to Mom and to us. Selena felt anger boiling inside her. In her father's eyes, she saw no sense of remorse, no regret, no pity. There was only fear in them. The man had lived all these years afraid of being found, of being forced to pay back the money he had borrowed. Here, look. Taking a sip from the glass, Victor turned to his daughter. At that moment, she was amazed at how insolent his look was. She looked. Now get out and don't dare to tell anyone about me. The father loomed menacingly over the girl. She looked up at him, tears welling up in her eyes. Selena had hoped to the last minute that her father's forced act had been weighing on him for the past 10 years, that he was worried about his family, that his heart was bleeding. But this man seemed to have the coldest heart of all. When you died, Selena was silent for a moment, then continued in a quiet voice, afraid to cry. The debt collectors came to our house. They were beating the money out of Mom. Mom sold everything to pay back what you borrowed from different credit companies. We had nothing to eat, nothing to wear. Mom worked 3 jobs. We were starving. Do you realize that? Your children and the woman you love were starving, exhausted by hard labor. Mom did everything she could to keep us alive and pay off your debts. It cost her health and us several years of humiliation. I was called a beggar at school because I wore overstitched clothes that were always darned. Did you feel sorry for us? Did you regret anything? The girl's eyes were filled with a pain that was hard to bear. Victor straightened up, again splashed whiskey into the glass. I haven't loved your mother for a long time, he said, but I didn't know my debts would be kicked out of her. Suddenly, he turned to face Selena. It was twisted with a grimace of anger. I didn't know. He shouted, do you realize that? Now get out and don't ever let me see you again. Get out, I said. Selena slowly stood up and walked towards the exit. In the doorway, she stopped, turned around and said quietly, I feel sorry for you. You have no one in this life. Emma remained silent the whole time, watching the drama playing out in her house. When Selena went to the front door, she caught up with her and walked her to the gate. In parting, the woman said, Selena, please leave me your phone number. The girl took out of her purse a notebook in which she usually wrote down the schedule of lectures at the institute, wrote the phone number, and gave it to Emma. She quickly walked away, no longer holding back her tears. How much time passed until the girl reached the train station, she did not know. Selena got lost again in the unfamiliar village, wandered through the streets, and when she got to the platform, the railroad platform was empty and night had fallen on the village. The station building was closed. Seeing the schedule on the door, Selena realized that there would be no more trains today and she would have to wait until morning. The autumn wind blew strongly. The weather, which had been so pleasant during the day, turned bad. The girl shivered, wrapped herself in a thin windbreaker. She wanted to sleep. Selena sat down on a bench, began to peck her nose, her eyes closed by themselves. Her body's defenses were working, forcing her to fall into a deep sleep to survive the extreme stress she had experienced today. Selena lay down on the bench, put her purse next to her, and fell into a deep sleep. Emma's face appeared in her visions, then her father's angry grimace. She woke up to someone snatching her purse from her hands. When she opened her eyes, she saw a boy running down the platform, holding her bag in his hands. That was the last straw. Selena sobbed, unable to hold back her tears. She sobbed like a child who had been badly hurt. The girl didn't understand why all this was happening to her, why she had come here at all, why she was looking for her father. What did she expect? That he would rush to hug and kiss her? That he'd apologize on his knees? No, that didn't happen. It wasn't his style. His father was a selfish man who cared only about his own well-being and didn't care about his family at all. Dawn was barely breaking in the sky. It was still a long way off until morning. Selena approached the station building, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her windbreaker. The first train was at 10 o'clock. She glanced at her watch. It showed 4 in the morning. Sitting at the station was pointless. The money for the ticket was left in the purse the boy had stolen. After thinking for a while, Selena took her cell phone out of her pocket and dialed Catherine's number. She picked up the phone surprisingly quickly. "Catherine, sorry to wake you up." Selena began to speak. "What happened? Why are you calling so early? Where are you?" "Worried friend. I'm in the village that the navigator pointed me to at the train station." Selena's voice suddenly snapped and she sobbed again. "Selena, calm down. Tell everything in order." Catherine was very worried about her friend. She was waiting for her to call in the evening and tell the news about her father, but there was no call. "My bag was stolen, and there is money for the return ticket." Calming down, complained the girl. "So everything will be fine," assured her friend. "Send me the coordinates. I'm on my way to you." "But you don't go anywhere, you hear? Don't go anywhere." "Okay," Selena replied. "I'll be waiting here on the bench on the platform. I'm on my way. Hang in there. I'll try to be quick," said her friend and disconnected. The girl leaned back on the bench. Everything that had happened to her yesterday seemed like a nightmare, a terrible dream. She waited for Katerina, occasionally glancing at her watch. 3 hours later, a red car appeared in the parking lot near the railway station. Selena's friend ran out of it. She hugged her, stroking her hair, saying, "It's all right now, don't worry." Whether from the stress she had experienced or from the cold, Selena was shivering. Noticing this, Catherine quickly led her friend to the car. "Sit down," she said, and herself pulled out of the trunk plush plate, covered Selena well that I took a thermos with hot tea. Though while rumbling in the kitchen, Mother woke up, and she began to grumble in her sleep that I at night wandered here and there. Catherine said something without a word, and her words echoed somewhere far away. "Oh, let's go home." Finally sat down behind the wheel, Catherine. "We will not hurry. Let's go quietly." Here I was flying like crazy. It's good at least the roads are empty, and that I still do not know how to overtake normally. The car started and drove down the street toward the exit from the village. The girls were silent. Catherine realized that now is not the time for questioning. She kept thinking what horror Selena must have experienced, seeing her father, whom she thought was dead. Suddenly, Selena began to sob loudly and then cried again. Without saying anything, Catherine stopped the car, pulling to the curb. She remained silent, looking out the windshield, realizing that her friend just needed to cry. Catherine had given her that opportunity. When Selena had calmed down, they set off again. Already on the approach to the city, Selena spoke up herself. "Thank you, Catherine, for getting me out of there. In fact, I was really scared when I was alone at the train station, and even without money to get home." "Don't thank me, we are friends," Catherine replied, "and I offered you to take my car. Would not have had to endure so much." If only her friend knew how much Selena had to go through yesterday. She suddenly really wanted to share with Catherine, and the latter, as if sensing Selena's mood, asked, "Well, did you at least have a successful trip? Did you find answers to your questions?" "Found," said Selena sadly. "Only after these answers, questions became even more." "What do you mean?" "Don't talk in riddles. Rebuses are not my thing." Catherine looked at her friend carefully, then moved her gaze to the road. "Have you seen your father? He is not really dead. Alive and well and even feels very good," said Selena. "He lives in a luxurious house with a beautiful woman, drives an expensive car, does not give a shit that his family almost starved to death because of his debts." "No way," stretched out her friend. Selena briefly told her everything that had happened yesterday about Emma and her father, and how he'd driven her away. "I didn't think people could be so cruel to their loved ones," Catherine muttered. "You're his children. Apparently they can." Selena replied in a philosophical tone. They had already arrived at her house. It was time to say goodbye. "Katusha, tell the Institute that I feel bad, that I'm sick," asked Selena and Katerina. "Sure, don't even worry." The friends said goodbye, and Selena wandered to her entrance. She wanted to take a hot shower and go to bed. Her mom was already awake. Seeing her daughter exhausted by a sleepless night and nervousness, she straightened her couch in the hall. When the girl came out of the bathroom, the woman did not question her about anything, silently went out and closed the door to the room so that Harvey, who had woken up, would not wake up her sister. Veronica also found out something. She did not sit idly by and try to find the old woman who had sold her daughter a box of photographs. She suspected that her dead husband's brother, Oliver, might have known about the old woman. After walking Harvey to school, the woman began to make soup, trying not to make any noise so as not to wake her daughter. She realized from the look on Selena's face that a lot had happened to her yesterday, so they would have something to talk about when her daughter woke up. Selena woke up in the afternoon. From the kitchen came Kolia's voice. "I don't want soup," refused to eat lunch boy. He studied in the first shift and had already returned from school, had to make cutlets with pasta. "Come on, eat," trying to speak quietly, ordered his mother. "In the evening, I'll make you cutlets with pasta, and now eat soup. You've been starving all day," shaking your empty guts. "You didn't eat in the school cafeteria again, did you? It's not good there." Selena's brother continued to whine unhappily. The girl took a robe from the back of the chair, threw it on, went to the kitchen. Very hungry to eat, and the aroma of chicken broth even more caused hungry salivation. "Good morning, everyone." Forgetting that she had already slept through lunch, Selena said. "What a morning," Harvey said indignantly. "Where have you been all night? Were you running to your beloved Avon again?" "No, I wasn't." Harvey jokingly slapped her brother on the forehead. "Chew on that and go to your room. Mom and I need to have a serious talk. Our conversation is not for children's ears." "Oh, found a child." Harvey considered himself all grown up and didn't like it when his sister pointed out that he was much younger than her. When he left, Veronica closed the door to the kitchen and sat down at the table with her daughter. Selena could see that her mother was waiting for news from her, but didn't know how to begin to tell her about the nightmare she had experienced yesterday in the unfamiliar village. Seeing her daughter's confusion, Veronica began her story. "When you left for the Institute," said the woman, "I went to the flea market. According to the signs you described, I started looking for the old woman. While I was looking for her, I thought, just show your face to me, I'll shake your soul out of you. But I'll know everything about my dead husband." So I was walking, and I saw Victor's brother standing there talking to some gnarled old woman. He shoved money into her hands, and he went to the exit of the bazaar with quick steps. I rushed after him. Why? Selena didn't understand. Uncle Oliver had never been on good terms with her father. They were always quarreling, and her paternal grandmother had always loved Victor more than Oliver. The girl looked at her mother incomprehensively. I wouldn't even talk to him. Knowing our situation, he wouldn't even help us with a penny or a piece of bread. and he couldn't have known that we were being drained of our father's debts. He didn't know, Veronica continued, so I caught up with him, shouting, "Oliver, wait, stop." He turned around, recognized me, and wasn't surprised to see me. I asked him who the woman he was talking to was, and also what he'd given her the money for. Then Oliver said it was time to tell me all about my husband and invited me to the cafe. Oliver was the eldest in the family. Besides him, there was Victor, who was 3 years younger, and his sister Natalie, the youngest. The children had never been friendly with each other. In childhood, they constantly quarreled, taking away each other's toys, bicycles, and sweets. As they grew up, they started fighting over money. Oliver knew that his mother, Veronica's mother-in-law, was always helping Victor with money, giving it to him without asking him to give it back. To her eldest son, however, his mother gave nothing. He worked hard and independently built a house for his family. When Oliver learned about the death of his brother, he was very worried. Despite the fact that they were friends, never talked heart to heart, never spent time together, such an early and tragic death Oliver would not have wished an enemy. He sincerely mourned his brother in the cemetery, supported his mother, who killed with grief, all the time trying to lie on the grave, shouting, "Take me with you, son." I felt sorry for Oliver and the family of his dead brother. They saw each other rarely. He almost did not know Victor's children and did not communicate with his wife. With his brother, they were like strangers. That's why Oliver didn't go to Veronica after the funeral, just as he didn't go while his brother was alive. Twice a year, he went to his brother's grave on the date of his death and on Victor's birthday. He often met his mother and sister at the grave. One day, he happened to overhear their conversation. The women thought the man could not hear. He was going through something in the trunk of his car. Oliver, indeed, did not hear everything, but the essence of the conversation. He realized that Victor had not died at all, but had simply faked his death to hide from the debt collectors, who were shaking money out of him and threatening him with death. Victor had thought it all through. Victor's mother told her youngest daughter, "It's scary to think what would have happened to him if we hadn't helped him fake the accident. Those bandits would probably have killed him already." "Yes, Mom, it's good that he's safe now," answered the daughter. "When was the last time you saw him?" 2 months ago," answered the woman. "We met secretly at the train station. We can't let anyone know Victor is alive, or they'll be looking for him again." Oliver got a chill inside. He'd never felt much warmth for his mother and sister, but to realize they were such complete hypocrites was beyond him. He approached the women and asked one single question. "So the brother didn't die in the car accident then?" Mother and daughter were confused. Oliver's mother was the first to pull herself together. "What are you talking nonsense, son?" she ranted. "There he is, lying breathless in the grave. Our Victor is dead, gone prematurely in the prime of life, and we can only mourn him and carry flowers to this grave." "Enough, mother," Oliver interrupted her. "I've heard everything. You just said you met him 2 months ago at the train station." "You misunderstood, Oliver." The mother tried to justify herself. "I didn't meet him." At this point, the sister entered the conversation. "Mom, maybe you should stop hiding from Oliver that Victor is alive. He's still his own brother." "Yes, so dear that they fought every day, did not give each other hands." The woman was indignant and angry, and Oliveira would be the first to give his brother to the collectors. "You think badly of me, Mom," the man said, turned away, hurried to his car. He realized that all these years his relatives deceived him, did not trust the secret, and he, like a fool, went to his brother's grave, put it in order, put a stone monument and a fence on his own money. Oliver thought that even if they quarreled when he was alive, he would make sure that his brother's burial place looked decent. "Did you believe him, Mom?" Selena asked Veronica. It seemed unreal to her, what Uncle Oliver said. "And you remember how grandmother had killed herself at the funeral, how she yelled at the cemetery, 'Son, take me with you to the grave.'" "That's the thing," Veronica said. "My mother-in-law never loved me. That's why she didn't trust me with the terrible secret of staging a car accident. But I did not even suspect what acting talents she possesses, because so played out the grief of his mother that even a skeptic would believe and laid down next to the grave to weep with her at the same time." That's right. Celine supported her mother. She remembered that day well and had not yet forgotten how his grandmother was writhing on her son's grave. So, Veronica continued, Oliver kept the news that his brother was alive for a long time, but it kept him awake. He started coming home to his mother's house more often to find any clues, to try to grasp at something that would lead him to his brother. He wanted to tell him what was going on in our family, how poor we were, how we were in debt. One day, Oliver noticed that his mother was going somewhere. In the hallway was a densely packed bag, closed tightly with a zipper. Oliver followed her and saw her meeting Victor in the park. He couldn't believe his eyes for a long time. His brother looked quite healthy, even a little better. When mother and son said goodbye, Oliver followed his brother and tracked down where he lived. He couldn't resist going up to him and saying something nasty. Oliver resented the fact that Victor had the conscience to deceive everyone, while he lived in a beautiful house. A few days later, Oliver came to the village again, bringing his camera with him. He took a few pictures. In his heart, Oliver wanted to take revenge on his brother and show the pictures to his wife, but he didn't dare to do it. He's a coward like Victor, a hypocrite like their mother, Veronica said, but the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And they also say that oranges don't come from aspens. Selena agreed with her mother. Yeah, that's right. Oliver preferred, like his relatives, to shift responsibility to other people, continuing to tell. Veronica poured tea for her daughter, moved the vase with jam. They all used to do everything by the hands of others. He couldn't wait to tell me that I wasn't a widow, but he was afraid. So he hired that old woman. He watched our family, knew almost everything about our lives. He knew which way you went to the bus stop to get to the institute and which way you came back. But he wanted to show me the pictures first. Oliver would pay an old woman to hit on me on the street under the guise of a psychic. When she did, Veronica yelled at the old woman and swung her bag at her so hard that she hurried away. Selena's mother was not a cowardly and indecisive person. She hated beggars and all those who tried to fool people's heads with predictions. Oliver's attempt failed. Then he decided to act through Selena. The old woman caught up with you and handed you the damn box, and you bought it from her out of the goodness of your heart, thinking she couldn't afford to buy food. Yes, that's what I thought, Selena confirmed. I remember hunger. I always feel sorry for people who are in trouble. Your kind heart is the reason why this box of pictures appeared in our house. That's the whole story, and then you can tell me the rest. Wait, Mom, interrupted her daughter, but Uncle Oliver, he's what? And that Uncle Oliver, he apologized to me for a long time. He said that he himself knew nothing, that if that accidentally overheard conversation, he would still consider his brother dead. Realizing that the conversation will now continue, and it will be long, Veronica again put the kettle on the stove to heat. He hated his brother, always wanted to hurt him. By revealing this terrible secret to us, he has his own agenda first and foremost. Oliver wants us to tell the police and the debt collectors that your father's alive. That's gonna hurt Victor, and it's not like Oliver had anything to do with it. I'm telling you, the whole family are cowards who can't solve their own problems. Do you believe that Uncle Oliver didn't know? The girl asked. 50-50, the mother replied, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's lying, if they were all working together on a plan to stage Victor's death. Oliver's just afraid to admit it. Mom, I feel like this isn't happening to us, like we're watching a movie. Unfortunately, we are, daughter. Selena shook her head. In turn, Selena also spoke about the information she had received. She told her mother how she had met Emma, her father's new wife. She didn't immediately understand me. At first, she thought I was one of those salesmen who go door to door and offer to buy all sorts of nonsense, Selena said. But then she invited me in and even fed me. She must be a good woman, Veronica said. But I didn't recognize my father. I saw nothing but coldness and anger in his gaze. Just imagine, he just chased me out of the house, threw me out the door like a kitten. Veronica's heart ached. She could imagine how her daughter felt. Her own father, who she had lost in childhood, for whom she had suffered so much, did not even ask her how she lived, how she finished school, how she entered the institute. What is going on in the fate of his daughter? And after all, she is his own blood, his first child. Veronica loved her children very much. With every cell of her body, she felt when they were bad, when they suffered and also suffered with them. She would never have let anyone hurt Lara or Harvey, but there was a mean man who didn't care about the children at all. She didn't know what to say to Selena. And she hesitated for a moment, then said quietly but firmly, "And you kick him out of your memory just as he chased you out of the door. Forget about him, daughter. Maybe that will make life easier." "I will, Mom," Selena promised. The next day she went to the institute. It was the last year of her studies, the most important. Selena hoped to graduate with a red diploma, so she took her studies seriously. Evan was waiting for her at the entrance. "Hi," as if nothing had happened, said the guy. "Hello," the girl answered him. Selena stopped fooling around. "Come on, come back to my place." The girl looked at him and slowly walked towards the institute. Evan followed her. Evan tried to take her hand, but Selena pulled it away. "Put it in her pocket. Don't fool around, Selena. After the institute, I'll help you to bring back the things you took. We'll live like before. I'm bored without you, do you understand?" Suddenly, the guy changed his tone, "And in general, I come home to eat nothing to eat. The room is a mess. Things clean and ironed soon will not be left at all. In what I will go to lectures and to friends." He's not even trying to apologize, Selena thought. The guy didn't think he'd offended her at all, showing his not-so-facetious side. "I'm not going back, Evan," she muttered. The girl stopped and looked into Evan's eyes. "You know, I've realized a lot in the last few days. You are not capable of love. It is more important for you to use people to make your own life comfortable. I don't meet such a person. Sooner or later you will betray me, and I don't want that." Selena walked down the path, opened the door to the institute building, and hid behind it. "Go to hell," Evan cursed angrily. After the lectures, Catherine and Selena went to the park. There was a small summer cafe where the girls liked to drink coffee and eat ice cream. Despite the fact that it was September, the cafe had not closed yet. The weather was perfect, sunny and warm. Selena really liked the way the park looked in September. It was completely immersed in the gold of the fall leaves. Rustling underfoot, they had a soothing effect on the girl. Sitting at a table in the cafe and waiting for their order, the friends talked quietly. "What are you and Mom now going to do?" asked Catherine. "Nothing," answered Selena. "We will live as we lived. This year I will have to work more part-time, but I will manage. I will get a diploma and go to work on a permanent job. Life will be more stable." "Don't you want to take revenge on your father for all the grief he caused you?" "No, this is not a solution. To resemble scoundrels, scoundrels. Hypocrites is not on the method," smiled Selena. "And Evan, what did you decide with him?" "Did not restrain, did not stop asking questions, Catherine." "With Evan we parted," answered the friend, feeling how from these aloud-spoken words she becomes easier on the soul. "You see, Catherine, Evan does not need me. He needs a nanny and a lover in one person. And I still want to be happy myself. Maybe I'll meet a man who will love me for real, will care, not insult me. Evan couldn't even break up properly. He insulted me again and sent me to hell. He didn't even realize that I could live perfectly well without him." The friends talked for a long time, but time was running out and we had to break up. I'll give you a ride home," Catherine offered. "No, thank you, dear. I want to walk," Selena refused. She went to the bus stop. Walking through the place where the old woman sold her a box of photographs, the girl noticed a familiar figure. She leisurely approached the old woman. "Hello," Selena said with a smile. The grandmother looked at her with an attentive gaze. At first it seemed to the girl that she did not recognize her, did not remember that student, whom she almost forced to buy the thing. But the old woman remembered her perfectly well. "Did you recognize the secret?" she asked. "Grandma did," Selena replied. "Doesn't it make you feel better?" the old woman asked. "Yes," Selena agreed. Then buy a kitten. The grandmother took out a fluffy lump with big eyes from under her coat. The kitten was barely a month old. "It's a puerile little kitten," looking at Selena. "It will bring you happiness." Selena opened her purse, took out her wallet, and handed the grandmother a bill. "I don't have any more," she said. "And I have enough." The old woman handed the girl the animal. Selena gently cuddled it to her and walked leisurely in the direction of her house. And the old woman waved her hand, quietly whispered, "He will bring you happiness." As she approached the entryway, Selena noticed that the light in the kitchen was on. "Probably Mom is cooking dinner," the girl thought. "I'm here," she shouted, opening the door with her key. "Who's home?" Harvey ran out to meet her. "What are you yelling about?" "Mom's having some important conversation in the kitchen. She sent me away." Told me to be quiet in the room, the boy warned her sister. He noticed a kitten in her hands. Oh, how tiny! The guy's voice sounded a few tones higher. He was practically squeaking, admiring the creature in Selena's hands. Where did you get it? Let me hold it. Do you think Mom will let me keep him? Here, said the girl, holding out the kitten to her brother, and go to your room since Mom told you to. So she really does have serious business. Who's in the kitchen? I don't know, some woman. My brother walked down the hall. When Selena entered the kitchen, she was speechless. Sitting at the same table as her mom was Emma. They were drinking tea, talking. Selena came from the institute, exclaimed Veronica. Come in, daughter. Sit down. Or rather Emma needs to talk to you. Hello, Selena, smiled the woman. Good evening. Not understanding anything, replied the girl. She pulled out a stool from under the table, hesitantly sat down. And how did you find us? You wrote me your phone number, said the woman, and her face was smiling. And I have serious connections that can easily find out any information about a person. And to get his address, find out his phone number, it's a matter of minutes. I thought I'd never see you again, Selena said, surprised. But I thought I'd never see you again. But I immediately realized that you and I will meet again, Emma said, which further confused the girl. You know, daughter, Veronica said, Emma is just as you described her, a very sweet and cordial woman, but it was our father who made her unhappy. Not understanding anything, Selena looked at her mother and then at the guest. Yes, that's how it is in life, dear. Emma continued the conversation. I thought everything was settled in my life. After hard years of life with my first husband, after his beatings and abuse, I met a decent man with whom I can meet my old age. Selena's mom laughed good-naturedly. It is unlikely. Next to people like Victor, old age is not enjoy, rotten man, said Veronica. But it didn't seem so to me at first. I even sincerely thought that I had fallen in love with him. It seems uneconomic, and at home a lot can do. True, he did not really like my father, but he always put up with my desires, because the main thing for the parent of the only daughter that she was happy. So he put up with it, but he came to visit less often. He was not happy to see Victor. Veronica poured tea. Selena asked Emma, would you like some more hot tea? No, Veronica. Thank you. She covered the cup with her palm. Celine noticed the expensive makeup, smooth skin, and several rings adorning Emma's long fingers. We would have lived like this with Victor if Selena hadn't shown up. The woman looked at the girl meaningfully. I didn't really want her to go after my father. Something told me that the information the daughter received could be poison, and it would hurt her a lot, the girl's mother said, propping her head up with her palm. She wasn't the only one, Emma said, but when I watched Victor's behavior with his daughter, it was heartbreaking. How much cruelty to his own child was revealed in him. And it wasn't Selena's fault. It was very painful for me to hear my husband's words when he shouted, swore, and threw the girl out of our house. I already realized then that I will not live with Victor, but I will definitely meet Selena. So you broke up with my father? Selena asked. Yes, but let's talk about everything in order. When Victor kicked Selena out of the house, Emma took the girl's cell phone number and returned to the kitchen. Her husband, as if nothing had happened, was heating up cutlets in the microwave. The face that had just been angry was calm again, as if absolutely nothing had happened in his life. Emma didn't know how to begin the difficult conversation about her husband's past. She hoped he would tell her everything, try to explain, justify himself. But the man remained silent. Then she decided to be the first to speak. Why didn't you ever tell me that you had a wife and 2 children? Emma asked. Would it change anything? Victor answered with a question. They have nothing to do with you. They are in my past. So why don't you tell me about your past? I basically know nothing about you. All information about you, as it turns out, is under a veil of secrecy. Victor didn't like the conversation Emma had started, but he tried to keep his cool, not to be rude to his wife. In the time he lived in her house, he'd grown accustomed to a sweet, carefree life. Sometimes he returned to his hometown to see his mother. This connection each time gave him the assurance that he was no longer wanted. Everyone considered Victor dead, and then Selena appeared out of nowhere. Victor did not understand how she could know that he was alive, how she found his address, but deep down he felt that sooner or later his secret would be revealed. Any information can only remain reliably secret when only one person possesses it. And what two people know, everyone knows, seems to be the popular wisdom. His mother and his sister knew that Victor was not dead. When the man came to his mother and told her that he was being chased by bandits, the woman was worried. Natalie was home that day too. The three of them sat down in the kitchen and began to think about how Victor could get away from the debt collectors. "You should go away," the sister suggested. "It's useless," her brother replied. "Those people are so powerful that they will find me even in Chicago. You can't hide from them anywhere. So we must convince them that there is no one else to collect debts from," said the man's mother. "What do you mean?" Brother and sister didn't understand. "Convince them that you're dead, no man, no debts." The three of them sat up until the morning, thinking over a plan of action. Burying a living person was not so easy. The most appealing plan seemed to be a car accident. "You should direct the car from the bridge. But at this time it is important to have time to open the door to get out," advised his mother. "Otherwise, underwater you cannot open and drown, die for real." Victor was scared for a moment. He was afraid to die in this crazy adventure, but he was even more afraid of the collectors. "You will succeed, son," his mother encouraged him. "And then when everything settles down, you will be able to live in peace. Natasha and I will do our best to make your funeral as realistic as possible." The sister nodded her head, agreeing with her mother. The plan had succeeded. Victor's body was not found. There was no one to bury him. The man was listed as missing. Then the man's mother went for a trick. She went to the investigator, almost lying at the feet of the policeman, begging him to change the status of her missing son. "He must have been swept away by the current. I'm sure my son drowned, choked by the river water. He was afraid of water since childhood, could not swim," sobbed inconsolable mother in the investigator's office. "Help the poor mother change the status of her son. I beg you. If you do not do this, we will not be able to make a grave in the cemetery. I don't have long to live in this world, but every day I want to come to this grave and mourn my son." She managed to convince the policeman. He changed her status and issued documents for the deceased Victor. So the woman went to her daughter-in-law and said, "Victor's body has not been found and is unlikely to be found, but we must make a burial ground so that there will be a place to come to honor him. You look for things of your husband, which were especially dear to him, which he loved when he was alive. We'll put them in the coffin and bury them, and we'll come to this grave with flowers to remember Victor." Veronica was surprised at the affectionate tone of her mother-in-law, who had never loved her son's wife, but took pity on her and agreed to bury Victor's things in the grave. The day of the funeral was appointed. The mother of Veronica's husband was out of her mind with grief, sobbing, falling to the ground, beating her head against the cross, set on a mound of cemetery earth. Her grief looked so natural that no one could suspect anything. Victor himself was present at his own funeral. Hiding behind the monuments, he watched from afar as the funeral procession went on, as the coffin was lowered into the grave, as his mother sobbed and his wife wiped away her tears. "It's all worked out," he triumphed. Everything changed when he saw his daughter in his house. Victor realized she can tell or has already told everything to his wife. She would definitely publicize the information because the woman did not know that her husband wanted to be considered dead in order to hide from debts. She will run, chalking her heels with happiness to the police to return him to the status of a living person and cancel the hard-won documents of Victor's mother. Everything he has now could float away from his hands. Emma stared at her husband, waiting for an answer, and he, like some movie on TV, was reviewing the pictures from his funeral. He was quite satisfied with a happy and carefree life with this beautiful woman, and he was also satisfied with the fact that she could not have children. The birth of heirs was no longer part of his life plans, but the man liked to live in his wife's beautiful house, drive an expensive car. Selling it could ruin his life. There would be debt collectors again. Despite the passage of so many years, these people do not forgive debts. They will even get them from the grave. I'm surprised they didn't do it. They would have found out Victor wasn't dead. "Darling," he spoke to Emma in an affectionate tone, "it's true that my past is complicated. Seeing my daughter has knocked me out, disturbed my peace. Let me calm down and I'll tell you everything in great detail in the next few days." "Okay," Emma agreed. And in the evening, when the woman was about to go to bed, She heard that her husband was talking to someone on the phone, trying to speak quietly so that his wife would not hear. "No, you don't understand. We have to take out all three of them. The woman, the girl, and the boy." "What do you mean? Take them out?" "For good, so that no one will find them." Emma realized that Victor wanted to kill his wife, daughter, and son and had asked someone for that favor. The woman's heart was racing. She suddenly remembered Selena's sad face as tears rolled silently down her cheeks from her eyes. The girl was suffering. She had been through so much, and this bastard wanted to kill her relatives so that no one would know the secret. When her husband fell asleep, Emma went down to the garden. She entered the gazebo, sat down on the sofa, dialed her father's phone number. The woman's father was a man of influence and never refused his daughter's requests. She could only tell him about the situation Emma was in. "Emma, Daddy, I'm sorry to wake you up, but this is very important." Her father was always ready to listen to his favorite daughter. The information she gave him went straight to the police department. The investigator who had long ago dealt with the case of the dead man was urgently summoned. Before morning, he managed to raise the documents, remember all the details, and prepare for Victor's arrest. Barely had the sun had time to light up the sky, Emma and Victor's house rang. The woman opened, letting the police officers in. "Are you Victor?" the investigator asked the still awake man. "I am," he answered uncertainly, "but what do you want?" Victor felt the danger. He was finished. He was about to be arrested. "You are under arrest on charges of faking your own death and a number of other charges. Follow us." "Yes, of course, but it's a misunderstanding." Victor tried to buy time. "We'll find out in the department whether it's a misunderstanding or not." The investigator clearly cut off his attempt to evade. "Let me at least get dressed. I can't go in my pajamas," Victor asked. "Yes, of course," replied the policeman. "You have 5 minutes." The man turned around and started to go up the stairs. Emma looked after him. Perhaps now she was seeing her husband for the last time. Suddenly, there was a noise in the yard. It turned out that having gone up to the bedroom on the second floor, Victor had tried to escape by climbing down from the balcony, but the police officers who had stayed on the street were waiting for him downstairs. The man was loaded into a car with bars on the windows and taken to the city. "I was very sad and unpleasant to look at all this," Emma said, concluding the story, "but when I imagined what would happen to you, I clearly realized that I was doing the right thing. The fact that he escaped from debt is a separate issue, but to order the murder of his own children, that's a real atrocity. People like that shouldn't be allowed to go free." Selena listened to the woman, eyes wide. Daddy, whom she remembered kind, affectionate, cheerful, already showed his other side. But the girl couldn't imagine that he could do that to his family. Had they suffered little through his fault, little lived in starvation, giving his debts to debt collectors, but to kill. It was beyond her comprehension. "That's not all the news I want to tell you about," Emma continued. "Yesterday I went to the investigator, found out everything about Victor's past. The man turned out to be quite talkative, especially he was in a great mood from the fact that he was able to close the hanging, which spoiled his reputation for many years. The management of the investigator every now and then reminded him of this high-profile and resonant case, and now it will be sent for further investigation. The guilty will be punished." The woman asked the investigator to find out which of the collectors could have hunted Victor. The profession is not so common. It was impossible to imagine that there was a whole staff of such employees in the city. The investigator quickly got information about those who go to the wife of the arrested Victor. Then Emma headed toward them. Arrogant-looking men did not immediately want to listen to Emma, but she called her father, and in 10 minutes she was invited to the office of the head of the collection firm. She told everything to the important and rather fat man sitting across from her, and then asked, "Please tell me how much money your employees were able to collect from the woman whose husband had allegedly died." The supervisor thought for a moment, then stood up and walked over to a large cabinet with glass doors. From there, he took out a large folder, sat down in his seat, and began to study the debtor's file. Emma waited patiently. Then the man took a piece of paper and wrote a sum on it, handed it to the woman. Emma's eyes went wide and her heart raced. She grew up in a poor family. Her father held an important position and was always in leadership positions. Emma herself had no problems with money. She could afford a lot, but when she saw the amount, she almost fainted. Even for her, the amount written on a piece of paper by the head of the collection agency was cosmic, prohibitive. How could a poor woman pay such money for her husband without starving herself and her children? Emma thought. All evening she had not found a place for herself, wandering about the house from room to room, going from corner to corner. She didn't know how to help that humble girl, her mother and brother who had suffered so much in their lives because of Victor. She even felt guilty that she had given that bastard almost 10 years of a cloudless, carefree life. Everything the man wanted, Emma presented to him on a silver platter. He knew no refusal in anything. The woman never counted how much money he spent from her bank account. Finally, a good idea came into her head, as Emma herself thought. The woman sat down in her chair and dialed her father's number. Emma, Daddy, we need to help some very good people. Veronica and Selena listened to Emma in silence. They had questions as the new information came in, but they didn't interrupt the woman, seeing how hard this story was for her. Emma reached into her bag that hung on the kitchen door handle and pulled out some papers. This is the deed to my house. It's in your name. She turned to Veronica. My house is worth a lot of money. My father helped me to draw up the document quickly through a notary. I, in turn, went to a real estate agency and agreed to sell the property. Veronica and Selena did not immediately understand what Emma was getting at. The woman was silent for a while, looking at the papers spread out in front of the girl's mom. This house belongs to you now, Veronica, she said, and you can sell it and buy the children an apartment in a good neighborhood. That way they'll have their own place. Or you can go and live in this house. It has all the facilities, a big garden, and even a swimming pool. Emma smiled, and Veronica and Selena looked at her in bewilderment. Believe me, this is the smallest fraction of what I can do for you. I can't bear to think that while you were starving, depriving yourself of the most basic necessities, I was essentially making Victor comfortable. It hurts me so much to think about it. That's why I made the decision to give you this house. It's up to you what you do with it. Any help you need from me. Gradually coming to their senses, mother and daughter began to smile. And then Veronica asked Emma worriedly, "Where will you live?" "Don't worry about me. You forgot that I have a luxurious, huge apartment in the center of the city." The woman reassured them. "Frankly speaking, I never liked to live outside the city in this village. It was Victor who persuaded me. Now I understand why he had to." "Thank you so much. You're an incredible woman." Selena walked over to Emma and hugged her. She suddenly felt that this woman was very dear to her, very close, very kind. "That's not all," Emma said. She opened a beautiful leather purse with rhinestones and took out a plastic card. "This is for you, Veronica." She handed the card to the woman. "There is a certain amount of money in this account. I think it will be enough for you to live comfortably, to be able to finish your son's schooling, and to help him get ahead in life." "No, not at all." Veronica tried to refuse the gift, waving her hands. "Take it. I am very pleased to do something nice for you. I need to understand that you will not need anything more. Every month, the card balance will be replenished. I'll take care of it." All three of them hugged each other. Tears of joy rolled down Veronica's face. Several months passed. Veronica and Selena sold Emma's house and bought 2 one-bedroom apartments. Selena moved into one of them. The other was waiting for Harvey to grow up. The girl was settling in. She was happy that her mother was not poor, thanks to Emma, and she had her own cozy nest. On the first day, Selena brought Silly with her. That's what she called the kitten an old woman had sold her at the flea market. "Silly," Selena called loudly to her pet. "Where are you hiding, little one?" She walked around boxes of things, bulks, bags. The things were not yet unpacked, probably crawled into one of the boxes and sleeps there peacefully. The girl began to open the boxes one by one as she suddenly heard a knock on the door. She opened it. On the threshold stood a handsome young man. In his hands he was holding Silly. "Hello, I'm your neighbor. Isn't that your cute little creature on my balcony?" The man handed the kitten to Selena. "Come to me, you're my happiness," said the girl, smiling.